I would say, low production value carbon TV episode to, Donnie Vincent at the far end of that spectrum.
Well, carbon TV is a platform.
Meaning, like, I'm just not naming a name. I'm
just
referring
like
to, like, just a general.
Just some show.
Name a name.
No, I'm not
Put a show together.
Who do you think really sucks?
Well, but
No, I'm not, yeah.
HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Deer Grow.
Man, we've been using Deer Grow products for a long time. The Plot Start and Plot Boost, more recently Plot Till. Now we've got 3 new liquid fertilizers that have been put in the mix that will cover everything we could want for a food plot program.
It's huge, man. The more food plotting we do, it's like, man, the liquids just make sense. Like whether it's herbicides or the Plot Start and Plot Boost, and now the fertilizers getting mixed in. It's like, man, I can combine all of those in certain cases and do less passes for more results.
I mean, it's all about efficiency. I mean, like you said, less passes. If you're out there treating your beans with glyphosate in the summertime, you can mix in this fertilizer, do that all at once. You have the boost in there that helps the metabolism. It's all about efficiency when we're talking about food plots. And really the big difference on these liquid fertilizers is you're bypassing some of these soil limitations, pH limitations, the soil type. In a lot of cases, we talk about dry fertilizers only being available for 17% of what you put down in the first year. These liquid fertilizers straight into the plant are 90% available in the first year. Huge difference in what you're going to see in growth.
It's huge. And so right now you can use code HUNTR15 for 15% off any of the Deer Grow products on their website. And as always,
better food plots, bigger deer. And we're back.
Heyo.
HUNTR Podcast, episode 197. Nick is dodging hurricanes in South Carolina. Was there, not here, coming back.
Yeah, going up on a Sunday. Have we ever done a podcast on a Sunday?
I don't think so.
Got a little different feel to it, doesn't
unless
it?
it was like our lives were normal. Yeah, a little different feel. We've been like podding hard this week.
Oh, yeah. This is number 4, I think, in the hopper. So that's why I mentioned we got some doubles coming. We're going to bang them out. But
yeah, I think we've accomplished like 12 or 13 hours of podcasting already this week.
We've accomplished a lot. Well, we've talked a lot. I don't know if we've accomplished anything, but we've talked a lot. So, well, hey, wherever you guys are coming to us from, we appreciate you guys being here, whether it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. Those are the main 3 platforms that we're on. Give us a like, follow, or subscribe, whatever's appropriate for the channel. We appreciate you guys being here. I said that already, but one of those will give you a notification whenever these drop. But it's every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern, regardless. Sometimes on Thursday, if we're feeling it. But if you've written us on Instagram DM or the website, those are the 2 that we kind of keep up with. I know there's a few backlogged in there, but we appreciate you guys writing us. We will do our best to get back to you. Merch is live on the site for the most part. There's a few things that are super limited quantities. We're kind of like working out some quirks, but you may have seen me wearing some of it. There's some cool hats, a couple new shirts. We appreciate you guys supporting us in that way. All that money goes back into making the podcast better and doing more of them. So that's
making the podcast great again.
Making it great again and hunting great again. I hope one of those, we've not even told them yet, but there's an Iowa Not Iowa shirt that if you buy, we're going to give some proceeds to Taylor Riggin and Chris Duncan's group, the
Iowa Sportsman's
Club, that are advocating for issues in the state of Iowa, forgive me. Ohio's to come. We're still working on something with those guys with Hunter's Advocate, but show those guys some support. And here we go.
Keeping on the trend for most of the podcast this week, we've got an in-studio guest. See, we've already been talking for 12 hours this week. That's the way it goes. So we've got Jacob Lishen from Land Limited and Outdoor Creatives, right? Dual media business.
That's true. That's correct. You got that spot on. So there's no need to correct anything.
I leave those parts to Jeremy.
Yeah, it's hand that responsibility off.
Yeah, it's Land Limited and
Outdoor Creatives.
Outdoor Creatives, which you guys are like evolving into.
Yeah, so Land Limited was the production business that Matt and I started going on 8 years ago now. Outdoor Creatives is kind of the next phase of our business model, where we're trying to focus on more on giving back what we've learned over the last 8 years to people, whether it's through entertainment content, through camera work, through the partners that we've supported and built, over the time that we've been in business, and then shifting more away from. We're always going to continue to do documentary film work and photography work in the hunt and the outdoor space, but we really want to evolve into, kind of diversifying our business models. I mean, you guys are businessmen yourself. You talk about it all the time. So I feel like that's a pretty understandable process, and the service industry is hard.
It is.
And we're lucky to have been, here for the last 8 years, but we also understand the need for growth, especially as you're talking about families and, kind of getting outside of the norm. I feel like,
diversifying income streams is critically important, especially when you talk about providing for the family and stuff. It feels like I don't know if we talked about it recently or not, but I feel like it's the mind of the entrepreneur who's always playing defense, right? And it's like, even if the breadwinner business is doing well, it's like, well, I need a safety net, and then so something else kind of spurs out from under that. And then it's like, well, like that's could be vulnerable at some point too. And then something spurs out from under that. And
is it defense? Is that how you're playing it? To me, it seems more like opportunity, like too many opportunities. The hard part is like, you don't want to say no. So you take good opportunities, but then you're constantly like trimming the vine. You're like Jacob and I were just talking the other day about revenue models, monetization, like just been picking his brain on that. And it's just like, dude, on any given day, it's like there's so much opportunity.
I think overall it is opportunity. The reason I start the business or even start to think of like putting time and effort into it is at least in this part of my life, right? I'm older than you are, is a defensive thing. It's a safety net. Like if business A somehow generates...
You've got more to lose too.
Yeah, business A...
You got a family to provide
has
for.
No money coming in all of a sudden for whatever reason. Business B can at least get me through a little bit.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, I think now I think you flip that script, and we've talked about it before for people who, want to buy land and do stuff like that. Then it becomes more of a, well, if you want to do that stuff, you're going to have to supplement in another way.
Sure.
Or if you just live in our economy now, you got to supplement yourself in another way too.
I think for us, it's a lot of like return on business value invested, right? So like for, with content creation and production, the business is and isn't accruing value because the value is yourself. It's your skill set, So it'd be like if somebody, wanted to buy the HUNTR Podcast and you guys were like, well, we're not staying.
It's impossible.
It was like, well, we listen because we like, the guys. So it's like, it doesn't make any sense that would be, so, you're providing a service and that service is only valuable as long as you're interested in being a part of it.
Correct.
So, we grew the business from being just Matt and I hustling to, having a 10 contractor team, and we were doing a ton of work. And like last fall, we shot 38 projects in 34 weeks.
Wow.
Film and photography work. And
that's a lot of projects.
It was it was the most we've ever done, and it was too much for us, because there's only so many decision makers to go around, and only so much time that you can invest. And the way I've explained it before is, the content side of things is so you're chasing a carrot, because you're trying to build relationships and show brands that you have the capability spectrum to execute on projects. And you're working really hard at that for years and years and years. And at times you might not realize when you caught that carrot, and all of a sudden well,
there's always another carrot. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. There's that, and you don't realize when you're where you need to be, and all of a sudden you're still chasing, and you kind of get, it's like you get too far down the rabbit hole before you realize like, oh, we bit off a lot, and then you have to try to execute on that, and it's hard, it's hard to turn that over, and then you kind of end up in this big tug of war of how much work can we take on versus how much can we pass off. And it being mostly a contractor-based service industry from a photography and a video standpoint, a lot of people are contractors, not a lot of people are employees for businesses like ours. So we employ most of our people via contractors, not like on W-2s. So we try our best to pay everybody a premium rate, contractor rate, and then we get whatever the sweets are left over, so.
Yeah. I think people would argue even today, I mean, especially people who have been in the media game and photo video world, go back even to the early 2000s, it's substantially harder to build a media business today than it was back then. Most of those guys, I mean, if you had the equipment and you had the skill, you could really drive business. Now, I mean, it seems like there's, quote, content producers around every corner, especially in the outdoor space. And we've seen that evolution, I don't know, for the last 10 years maybe or so, where it's people that are, frankly, they're good. They're good at what they do, but they're not doing it to make a living. They're doing it as a hobby or to be involved in the industry, right? And that has created a really, I think, tough time for a lot of people who are trying to create media businesses in the space to make money.
Well, I think like there were, back in the day, there were only so many viable revenue stream models. So, you know, it used to just be TV,
Right.
and then like kind of the internet, you know, even all the way up and through, you know, through 2010, 2014, I feel like we hadn't hit the heyday of like the influencer era and the content creator era, where everybody's walking around with a phone that's capturing footage as good as, you know, the cameras we had 8-10 years ago, you know, the commercial cameras.
Right.
You know, so now you have people that are competitive as creators, and everybody has the ability to be that, you know, and you know, to an extent, brands are realizing that there's value in that, you know. But I do think that there's still value in the commercial side of things and what we bring to the table. But what our role is shifting, right? So like we're focusing on, you know, we've always wanted to, but have continued to even further embed ourselves into being storytellers, you know, and that's our goal, is we're trying to tell something that the average everyday consumer can't tell, you know, via their phone or, you know, a handy camera. You know, we want to tell stories that are impactful and deep and meaningful, whether they're commercial or photography stories, you know, whatever that looks like. You know, we're interested in articulating that to you know, people, and then doing it at a level that, you know, you really need time in the game to be able to understand and produce effectively. You know, and I think the hardest part for creators right now, and the thing that was so difficult for us in the beginning, was just people overlook the relationship development side of that process, because it's, you know, it's, as with everything, people work with people they like, not people that provide a service. Because there's a lot of people out there that do what we do that can match us technically, I think, or, you know, even just default to the kind of general consumer that happens to have a phone, is also a hunter or an outdoorsman. But, you know, I think that our interest in trying to build relationships with the brands and people we work with, be advocates for them, be active users, you know, so that it's like, you know, when we go talk to somebody like Hoyt, I'm not just pitching Hoyt on working and building a project for them. I'm actually being like, hey, I shoot Hoyt, I hunt, like, here's what I can tell you, you know, here's my experiences. So they, you know, hopefully our intention is for them to feel comfortable bouncing ideas off of us, because we are not only their target market, but we're also like capable creatives that can execute on their interests.
Yeah.
Dude, that storytelling aspect is so, it's like almost seems like a thing of the past for in a lot of ways, not for the better either, because we're all looking for that. I think it's like, it manifests itself in conversation when we talked about like, oh, they don't make good movies anymore. Or it's like, you know, even if you look at like outdoor industry content and stuff, but it's like, we're looking for that. And I know that I have stumbled across it, like in movies in particular, where it's like, I feel the same way, where I'm like, oh, it's just, there's no substance to these anymore. It's just like, oh, it's just bland. But every once in a while, I'll find one where I find myself caught up in a storyline, and I'm like, and then it's over, and then it ended. I'm like, that was one of it, and I just, there it was, and then it's, you know.
I think this is where I mean, we're gonna drift in and out of the tinfoil hat side of this conversation quite a lot, I feel like, but I really blame, to an extent, there's so many goods and bads that have come with like attention spans and social media and phones, and, you know, what people can and can't digest, and the way that businesses and brands have interpreted that. And I think that there's good sides to that, and I think there's bad sides to that. I think the bad side is the world is so flash now. Everything is just impulse buy, impulse action, impulse digest, that I think you have a large percentage of, you know, if not the predominant percentage of consumers and people that are digesting content are just doing it, you know, impulsively. But you also have a small percentage of those individuals who are rebelling against that, and they're seeking those stories. And that's where you get brands like, you know, like Yeti or anybody else that are investing into, you know, Hoyt, Yeti, companies like that invest into storytelling, you know, that are really trying to build, you know, meaningful documentaries that showcase people that represent the lifestyle that they want to support, or that they want their consumers to embody, that are real world individuals, and not necessarily just like the, you know, just like the, I don't even know what to framework that, but kind of like the conventional TV commercial.
Yeah, it's commercialized.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, I think a lot of us, especially in this space, would recognize, well, let's do this. Let's back up a step. You know, one of the things that I thought was really cool when we all first met is we're like, well, dude, you know, send us a link to some of the stuff that you did. And we got we got some of the Onyx films that basically came across, and it was like, oh yeah, I've seen these. Like it wasn't like, oh, these are cool. Like I'd already watched them and was already compelled, with them. So I think to your point there, and it's different from a consumer versus, somebody that's in the space. But, a lot of people in the space looked at that and said, man, I can't believe they're spending that much money and they're not tracking return on investment. Like, all the things that have transitioned what is, modern day hunting industry and focus for marketing and advertising. And on the other side, it was like, maybe you couldn't tie direct return on investment to it, but I think the impact that those pieces of content had on the audience were huge. And, Yeti and Onyx, at least in those categories, it's like, that's kind of what those guys are like known for when they come out with a piece of creative. It is a film-based type of thing where you can sit there and actually try to put yourself in that position.
Well, and it's hard because I think as a brand, as a brand, like those organizations, I feel like have built a representation up. There's kind of two paths that you can take, at least from my position. I'll preface this by saying this is obviously my opinion from an onlooker's perspective, but you have two kind of directions that you can take. And when you leap in as an early brand, you can really take the focus on building that story dynamic of your brand from the get-go, or you can say, hey, we're going to churn and burn with product until we build up enough revenue to then invest into the story of our brand. Or you can start, on the brand story side. I think organizations that are, like Onyx or Yeti have built their brand up to the point to where they're like, hey, people know who we are.
Right.
Let's kind of show them what we're about. And that's where their investment is going to, like Yeti and Onyx, that's where their investment is going to those stories, because those guys believe in that content, and they always have, but now that they're large enough, they feel like they can, or I'm interpreting, I don't want to speak for them, but I think they feel like they can help make an impact by communicating the right messaging, and not only educate people, but force them to think, kind of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Maybe like outside of the norm, like kind of challenge their traditional thoughts and values about something.
Well, just what they would expect to see from marketing traditionally.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they still, when we work for brands, they still are asking us to build that traditional content. It's just whether they're also investing into storytelling as well. So, and I think that, one of the things that excites me about some of our space is that with the advent of podcasting becoming more the norm, long-form discussion becoming more the norm, competition in the YouTube space, it's actually diversifying where people are hearing content. So that's a positive. And it's also pushing brands to tell stories regardless of the medium that they're telling them in, versus it being like in the late 90s and the early 2000s, everything was like bucks a Tecumani.
Yeah.
And it was just like all about the kill and buy this DVD with 47 whitetail
get a
kills.
magazine in and there's a full page ad. It was like the biggest buck you've ever seen, and it's like, use my product and you'll get this.
Exactly. And that was what sold people, and I think that as an industry, we made this odd shift from coming out of like the 80s, the 70s and the 80s, where hunting and outdoor recreation was so rooted in storytelling and family and connectivity and in interpersonal communication. Hunting was an opportunity for people to provide for themselves, but also to connect with those around them. And then it evolved into this position of, oh, we can use this to sell stuff. And then they kind of really, I think, grasped on that, the inch mark and the antlers, and then went almost too far, because I think that's a common American thing, is we go too far one way, and then we're like, oh man, it's a little too far, and then we go too far the other way, and we kind of eventually
just back and forth,
figure out where somewhere in the middle is. And I think we went too far on the inch and the product side, and that goes for the country as a whole, but I think that, now we're continuing to push the ball on the story side as an industry. And I think we're starting to see the values of that. And it's changing the landscape of what media is. People are digesting television content, I think, less than they've ever digested it. And the money is really tight for those guys that are in the TV space.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting thing, like trying to reflect back. And we had a conversation at some point on it, but like, marketing in the hunting space has always existed. Like go back to whatever the 50s when Sears was sending out their catalog. Like that was their way of marketing, right? And putting the the flannel or the Sears, or the old Montgomery Ward 12 gauge in there, whatever it is. Like that was their form of marketing. And clearly in the as we approach the 90s and early 2000s, that really picked up. But if you, to your point, how things have changed, if you look at it now, it surely feels like there's more advertising in the hunting space than there's ever been. But in a strange way, like if you backed up 10, 15 years, there probably was more visible money being spent in the outdoor space because it was between a bunch of different people, right? Content producers, TV, whatever. Now, most of the time, the brand is using their money and they're paying influencers and stuff, but the majority of their budget is staying in line under their own umbrella for things like Facebook advertising or YouTube advertising or whatever it might be. And so it's an interesting twist to I don't have an answer to it. I don't know if there's less money being spent today than there was 15 years ago, or if it's just less visible because it's staying underneath the brand umbrella.
I feel like there's probably more money being spent. I just think that it's not all dumped into, for example, like any of the, I grew up watching like the Night and Hail guys.
Oh, yeah.
And like all the, just
Mm-hmm.
the old school TV guys, that we all kind of know and love from childhood, I feel like, or from, me and, and Jared's childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I was already hunting at that point while you guys were watching them.
But it's, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, it's worth saying, like, dude, there are things happen. It's not like we are all seeing on the industry either. Like there's an entire, like the Outdoor channel, like, we've said multiple times, like it's, it was this mecca and everybody had it. And that's where we
pinnacle
that's where we all saw this stuff. Yeah. I mean, it was all there and everybody had it on TV and stuff. And like, for you and I think I've not had that for, is it 10 years now?
Yeah, I mean
8 years.
It's since I've lived here, I haven't had it, so it's been 8 years.
Like
for me.
literally since I've subscribed to like the Outdoor channel or the Sportsman, that package. When I remember when they took it off, whatever, Dish or Comcast or something. Around the time I got married too, we just didn't do that. I didn't re-up with that, and I felt like the content was like kind of on the decline at that point. Everybody had reached a point of frustration with commercialization. It's like an infomercial at that point. I realized what it was, and I was like, it's cool. I mean, I grew up on it, but I said I don't need it.
Mm-hmm.
It's still there though. Like there is still a lot of money being spent on advertising there. There's still a vast majority of, like, if you're going to call them hunting shows, are on those platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And we all exist in what the three of us feel like is like the future of hunting, or
it's like
just
a parallel universe.
the content medium. Yeah, it's like that stuff's there, and there's people that subscribe to it, but to me, it's completely out of mind. I've not. It's kind of weird.
It is, but it's. I think that I think where I was going with that was like the money used to be allocated to, like, you have a TV show host, and like that guy got like 80%. Like he got
buku dollars.
Yeah, just big time money. But now that money is being spread across way more things. And at the same time, you're dealing with I think that there's, because consumers see so much on such a regular basis, brands are fighting the battle of, like, how do we move product and be competitive, from an ad spend perspective, which is a whole other conversation.
Well,
because
eyeballs.
of how,
Where are the eyeballs? How do we get in front of people?
Yeah. So you're dealing with that, but you're also dealing with how do we continue to be competitive from a story perspective, and we don't want to lose those historic, like, brand, like TV representatives or people who
the icons of the figureheads that everybody's recognized for so long.
So it's like I think there's more money being spent, but I think it's being divvied out in a lot of different ways. I think that my fear would be that when you can focus all on one thing, like maybe we could in the 90s, I think you can keep track of it a little bit better and maybe manage it a little bit better. But I think with the diversification of all of the content, I feel like the quality of the type of TV content we see now is actually less quality in comparison to what we saw in the 90s.
I think they have to be more cost effective.
Exactly. So
where before, they may have brought in, speculative, but $1 million in TV sponsorships amongst multiple brands. And now if they're bringing in half of that, I bet they're lucky.
Well, the payoff was bigger. Like you're talking, the budget is now diversified. At one time, a bulk of it was going to like the outdoor industry or the outdoor channel stuff, and so it was worth it for creatives to be like, I'm going to invest all this into my production to where now I think it's like it's way less to have your show on the outdoor channel. I mean that being the main thing. It's just like it's what's the
yeah, and
you know,
and you have multitude of platforms. So you got like Carbon TV, and I think it's like My Outdoor TV is another one.
My Outdoor TV.
That's outdoor channel.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's outdoor channel too.
You've got Outdoor America. You've got Waypoint TV.
Yeah,
so you've got all these different
streaming platforms now too, and you know I that's kind of where I wonder if because I don't think anybody in the hunting community or in the outdoor community is trying to misrepresent the outdoors, but are we always putting our best foot forward?
No.
And it's like, I think that there's in light of the interest of business, are we throwing things at the wall to have something to stick on the wall, or are we actually sitting down as a community and going, what's best for the longevity of the hunting community and for the outdoor community as a whole? And that's where I think my fear comes with there being so much content out there, and our percentage of people who actually make decisions on what we do, being like the hunting community specifically, is so small in comparison to the grand voting, the deliberative body of people that live in our country. It's like, well, we're diversifying ourselves and spreading ourselves thin, and everybody's a creator, but are we thinking about, like, what does this mean when we put this out there? Mm-hmm. What is this, are we doing this just because we're trying to get our name out there and become the next big YouTube or, Carbon TV, host or whatever? Or are we actually being like, this is going to create a positive impact for hunting in general, where content is, in a world where content is so digested and so accessible, and where our rights and our opportunities are, voted on and at stake all the time? Because that's the individuals who don't do what we do, the only way they understand, for the most part, what it is that hunting is, or a lot of outdoor recreation is by the content that they can consume. Mm-hmm. So when you put something out there that, as a hunter or an outdoorsman, whether you're a commercial content creator or a social media individual or an influencer, or even just an everyday consumer that takes a picture and posts it on Instagram, I think we need to be more aware and cognizant of like what that means. Mm-hmm. And what representation does that fall back on us on? And I think it's our responsibility as creators, podcast hosts, outdoorsmen, whether it's YouTubers or TV guys or whoever, and storytellers, it's our job to be accountable to that for ourselves and for brands as well. Like as a brand, like, are you supporting things that are, more financially interested than they are the long-term and longevity, of what it is we all love, in my opinion.
Well, I think we even see that within, you talk about the hunting community versus the non-hunting community. I think you even see it within the hunting community. And like, obviously on our podcast, Jared and I talk a lot about land ownership and land management aspect. And if you read the YouTube comments, half of them are people that would say, well, that's deer farming. That's not the average guy. Even there, those people can't relate to what we're talking about. And I'm not, blaming them or anything. It's just they've never done it, so I don't expect them to understand why we're passionate about it and why we spend so much time and effort and money to do that. But it's a clearer picture of, we look at it as like, well, we're benefiting ourselves, but we're also benefiting that entire herd. Like, there is no fence. Like, they can run off of my Ohio place into public, and you could go shoot them and hunt public. But the understanding is lacking from the other side just because they haven't done it.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Hoyt.
What can we say, man? Another year back with Hoyt. We're both shooting RX8s. I'm shooting 70 pounds in the bourbon, which I love bourbon.
That's great.
And you're shooting 80 pounds in the straight black.
Blacked out as always, man. I got so I'm shooting the 500 grain Easton Arrow this year. And at 80 pounds, I'm flinging that thing at like 300 feet per second. I mean, it's deadly. Put a water buffalo in front of me and he's done.
I mean, we shot it earlier. You literally put an arrow through a brand new target, like never been shot before.
I know. So one other thing that Hoyt is doing this year is they're making all their own strings in-house. And so the quality is top notch, and it just really is something that is setting them apart from their competitors.
Well, what we always try to do when we go to our bow shop, Ultimate Outdoors, is we try to shoot other bows just to make sure that we are really giving everybody a fair chance.
Sure.
The reality is it's a no-brainer. Hoyt, it stands above all of them every single time.
Definitely. And so right now you can use code HUNTR, HUNTR, for 20% off any apparel on the Hoyt website. And as always,
get serious, get Hoyt.
I mean, dude, I think the perception just from the general public is just from people that they're following, like in whatever capacity. Like, I'm just trying to do an audit on my intake too of like and I don't mean to pick on the outdoor channel, like it's all channel, like all TV in general of any industry. It's just like, but all of that is kind of like, I think like they're still there, and like, you know, people over 40 or 50 probably still subscribe to like a Dish or a DirecTV or something, and there's still like sports and there's all that. But in general, from my perception, like my 31-year-old mind and like the stuff that I engage with, it's almost, there's very little of that. Like in terms of formatted media, like entertainment, it's, you know, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, you know, Apple TV, Peacock. Like you have these streaming platforms where it's like, okay, there's shows, there's series, and it's boom, boom, boom. And they have like decent stuff every once in a while. Most of that doesn't have advertising because I'm paying for it in a subscription model. So it's like, it's pretty limited in that sense. A lot, I would say vastly more of my entertainment or just engagement with content comes from social media or YouTube. Like, and it's not just like those platforms and it's their productions, it's the people on them that are putting things together. So like, for instance, you know, we're making content here. We're sitting, we're recording our conversation, we're putting it on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts and social media platforms, like in a deal here. And this has influence in some capacity. People would see this and be like, hey, I don't know, that's just what I watched, and I agreed with some things they said, and that made me feel a certain way. It seems like that's how opinions are. Dude, you could say like on the grandest scale of like from a podcast standpoint would be like the Rogan experience. Everybody, a lot of people who have listened to that have been like, oh, I'm kind of into cold plunges. Oh, I think I would check out like the Wim Hof method or whatever it is. And it's just because we consumed, and it was because of him and because of what they did. So it's like, it's interesting how it's like, and I'm curious how this ties back into our conversation and your business model, frankly. There's kind of like a give and take between like a formatted production model that certainly has value and has way more of a storytelling ability, in my opinion, and a quality overall. And if you want to call them influencers, but it's just people who create content creators.
I think I think maybe my qualm with the thought, I mean, and kind of where we're going is just like, or at least this topic of the conversation is more along the lines of like, you know, as storytellers, as content creators, you know, interpreting what we're putting out there, you know, because of the fact that, yes, it's easy to put something out there for the individuals who understand it. It's difficult to put something out there for the collective unity of both of those individual groups in general, right? So I feel like we're so focused on ourselves at times that we don't always think about the way we're being interpreted. And you know, it's not always, you know, I feel like one of the things that was hard for me to learn in a sales perspective is if you're coming off incorrectly, it's not that they're hearing you incorrectly, it's that you're articulating it incorrectly oftentimes. So it's like we need to take a step back sometimes when it comes to how we're pitching things, you know, in this volatile time in hunting's kind of life cycle. I feel like, I mean, you know, I think it's the best hunting's ever been as far as the opportunities and the caliber of deer we can go chase and things like that. But it's also at a really volatile time from a risk perspective because so much content can get put out there and we can get saddled with a label of things that aren't necessarily like positive on our end because one naysayer did one thing or did, you know, one TV show was interpreted the wrong way or you know, put something out there the wrong way. And I guess where I'm going with that is that I feel like it used to be, hunting used to be, we did a better job back in the day. And when I say back in the day, I'm talking like early 90s and prior.
Mm-hmm.
We did a better job at showcasing the story and why people hunted outside of just like, hey, I'm in a tree stand now, I'm shooting a buck. You know, like it was always like these guys are having a great time or gals are having a great time.
Which
People
would
are
have been
building a
what?
community.
What was early 90s and prior? What was the medium?
It was TV. I
Just
feel like it was
TV.
TV or VHS.
Yeah, I mean, most of it would have been like we talked about before, but you know, your Sunday night TNN type stuff, which would have been like, you know, Realtree, Buckmasters, like Mossy Oaks Hunt in the country.
Do you feel like they did a good job? I mean, do you guys feel like they did a good job at showcasing the fun and like the community aspect of hunting?
Do you?
I think so.
You were around for more of that, probably. I might have seen some reruns.
So TNN would have then changed to
I never
like
saw TNN.
Versus.
Okay.
There may have been a small ESPN jump there versus then that went to Outdoor Channel.
Even like the way that if you look at content that was, or even imagery that was published, like the older imagery in general that reflected hunting and the feel of hunting, the things that make
there's a sportsmanship.
Exactly. The thing that make us feel, the things that make us as a unit or as a community feel nostalgic. Well, the reason we feel nostalgic is because I think we fell in love with that. And in some kind of a somewhat perverse way, it kind of like evolved into this, buy this, kill this big deer. And like everything is around the scale of the deer. And I'm not saying I don't love to hunt big deer. I do. Sure. But I'm just saying that I think that there was this manipulation of what was...
Yeah, the glorification of a grip and grin is where that came from. So.
Exactly. We used to publicize, I feel like, the feel of the community and the hunt and the environment and what went on, you know, versus like, hey, now just like of a magazine cover.
Well, even the magazines you got back then, like you, whether it was a North American Whitetail or Deer and Deer Hunting or Films, whatever it was, like you read the articles as an educational thing, or you know, in North American Whitetail, the story of this buck. That and I mean, I feel like we've talked about trying to narrow it down. I don't know when that changed, but to your point, it changed hard.
There was a hard shift at some point, and I think it's hard to, like you said, it's hard to pin down the exact window when that happened, you know. But if you look at the type of, we'll look at like the leaders in the storytelling space in the industry, you know, like brands like we talked about, Yeti, Onyx, Sitka, First Light. All those guys do a really great job at storytelling, and you know that's who they are. That's what they try to put out to the world to showcase what their brand embodies. But a lot of it is this callback to nostalgia, because it doesn't. Most of those pieces, they're showcasing this entire experience that culminates in this one split-second thing, and you're giving the opportunity for, regardless of whether you're an experienced hunter, somebody who's never hunted before, or somewhere in between, you're giving the opportunity for them to digest that versus like, you know, I think some of the more standardized format content that was developed in like the mid to late 90s, somewhere between the late 90s and 2012.
See, that's where I must not be able to remember far enough back to that, because what I remember about like even the monster buck stuff. I mean, a lot of people would say that was kind of it. That was the first big, like when the industry was really ramping up. That was a lot of what did it, and people wanted to be on that. That's what blew some people up. Like what else?
Primetime Bucks was another one. Primos was another one. Like all of those had VHS and or shows to complement them.
What I recall about those productions was, and you can go back and not reference them specifically, but if you go, like, even some of them live on YouTube now, it's like as many kill shots as possible.
Sure. Oh, sure.
They realize at some point, they're like, that's what guys want to see. Like, that's the...
Yeah, they jammed 15 kills into a 2-hour DVD.
That's literally what they're, 15 kills in 15 minutes.
And I think, and that's the turning point that I'm talking about. I think maybe when I'm kind of looking at something that's, that I would consider like nostalgic, it's like, I'm trying to remember, there's this guy I always see on Facebook now that's like, he was a callback to somebody that was created. His last name is Fitzgerald. Is that who he is?
Dan Fitzgerald.
Dan Fitzgerald. Mm-hmm. He was like, I feel like all of his, now I don't know enough. I don't know a lot about him. I just know what I see on Facebook in the reel. So I'm going to preface this in case there's anything out there that I shouldn't.
Well,
know
I'm
about
sure
doing,
there'll
but-
be a giant Fitzgerald falling that just like pounces us.
Who
for
is
it.
he?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So,
You know,
but it's
Dan and Larry Fitzgerald. The Fitzgeralds wears flannel, shoots a Matthews with fingers, still does, but always shot compound with fingers.
so if you look at his old
Big
content,
beard, glasses.
So not the Wenzels.
No, not the Wenzels.
Okay.
But I feel like I'm using him as an example. He was a representation of that like 80s and back crowd
Absolutely
of media
was.
creators where like there was, you know, like he's cooking deer steaks on an old deer stand.
On a tree stand.
On a tree stand that he, you know, that he took with him on a canoe hunting trip.
Yeah.
You know, like where there was so much more about the experience other than just the harvest itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's maybe where I'm kind of leaning to. And something that, you know, that's where I feel like I hope that our industry continues to move towards showcasing the story of what we do in a longer format, whether it's, and by longer form, it could be a TV show length, you know, but not just having the whole 20 minutes be right about the harvest itself,
Mm-hmm.
you know, versus, you know, having that whole time be focused on like showing everything that goes into it, which is why we all love it. At the end of the day, it's like, you guys don't go out and man it. Like, yes, you love hunting, but if you just loved hunting, you could go shoot something. It's easy.
Sure.
Like we can all just go hunt and shoot something, but you love the land management. You love the process.
Yeah, we want
you
the process.
You know, and the process is what we all fell in love with as kids, because before all of the technology, before everything, it was, we were out scouting with our dads or whoever our mentors were, or, you know, we were out, you know, doing field work. We were out watching farmers. We were fantasizing about deer on magazine covers. You know, there was this allure that came with the effort that went into it. And I feel like that's where you see brands going to this storytelling, is because they're trying to showcase, they're trying to find that allure again. At least that's my interpretation. And that's why we love to do that type of material, is because for us, it's an opportunity to showcase what hunting or what outdoor recreation really means to us. It's why we all fell in love with it to begin with. Yes, everything culminates around that harvest. You know, just like if you're on social media, that bit of instant gratification of seeing a picture or a video that you like, everything culminates around that. But there was a lot that led up to that in your life to get that iPhone in your hand and then to go into that process. And, you know, but the community, our culture across the country, or the, you know, the globe in general, is that of that instant gratification. So that's why I feel like hunting has gotten, in a lot of ways, narrowed down to that finite moment, that 15 seconds, you know, because that's, the world lives in 15-second snippets now. So if you're going to showcase 15 seconds, well, the story is the kill, you know? So it's like, how do we take a step back as a community and go, let's put our best foot forward and show people why we actually all really love this, you know? And then that'll help them understand why we're so passionate about all deer and all caliber of deer. And maybe some of us, whether it's, you know, us as a community here, or, you know, whoever, choose to chase a larger caliber deer or put in effort to chase a larger caliber deer because there's justification for that. Because we have a foot in the game. Like, we've built this like passion for ourselves, you know, and it's like, I refer to it as a passion because I don't even think hunting is a sport. I don't like referring to it as a sport, because I feel like it degrades what hunting actually is to me. Like, you know, as a guy who played football his entire life, passionate about athletics, you know, nothing about the formal definitions of the word sport relate to hunting.
Right.
We would agree.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Competition being the main one.
Yeah,
It's
you're not competing against the deer for its what? No,
Yeah.
the deer is just out there doing its thing. You know,
Yeah.
you're not in a competition. I don't care what anybody says. You know, you're not competing for anything. You know, so and you know, it's like, I don't like referring to deer or animals as game. You know, I think they're wildlife. You know, I don't like referring to what we all do as a sport. You know, and I think little steps like that are low-hanging fruit opportunities for us in the community to make changes around, that just show what we all know and already feel and believe about, like the wonderful animals that we chase and pursue and are invested in. But for some reason, we feel like because we do what we do, we don't have to articulate that to those who don't do it. You know, because we're like, well, you don't know. so don't tell me how to do it. So, well, that's not the way the world works, especially when you're not the larger voting body to determine what you have to make a case.
Yeah.
It's the way the country is. Like, if you want to keep something, show me why you get to keep it.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And
dude, I think for sure most people don't feel that way. As far as like the hunting community, like most would say it's my right. Like I have to, people don't need to understand it. They don't, you know, I would say that's probably how people feel.
I think a lot of people feel
that may be negligent. I don't know.
I think a lot of people feel like they have the right, and I think that they have the right to have their opinion. I totally fine with that, but I think that doesn't mean that they don't have the right to justify. Like it's like you're still held accountable to justification. You know,
what do you mean?
Meaning like you can have an opinion on like, let's say you can be like, well, I feel like I have so a fad that went around for a long time. I don't know if you guys saw it. There were people on Facebook like taking pictures with bucks where they were laying on the ground with like a buck on its back, like looking up at the camera. Like it was like a Facebook social media thing that I kept seeing. I'm not like you're portraying the animal and your experience with that animal in a poor light, right? Now I'm not saying there weren't any brands that I saw that were invested in this, and if they were, like I would happily scold them, but you know,
it's just distasteful.
It's distasteful.
Yeah.
So you know, it's
to
like,
me, it seems like a kind of a relation to like a Second Amendment right. I feel like the feeling is kind of like the same. You know what I mean? It's like I don't have to justify to you why I have a right to carry my gun. Is how people would feel. I don't have to justify why it's my right to hunt. Like come and take it.
You don't. But the reality is we live in a world where we vote on things, and we're the smaller constituency.
Yeah.
So it's I agree with you that I personally believe everybody has the right to do what they want to do. Like you do in your house what you want to do in your house. I'm not going to bother you. But when what you do has the potential ripple effects to affect what I want to do, that's when I'm going to speak up and be like, hey man, like I support your freedoms and I support your interests, and whether you're a person or a brand or an individual or a content creator, I support your ability to do whatever you're going to do. But at least think through what you're doing and how that is going to be perceived. And if it's not, you know, you putting your best foot forward in an effort to create something that's going to help us as a community in a volatile time for hunting and outdoor recreation and access and all of those things, then maybe just consider interpreting what you're trying to say in a different light. You know?
Well, I think it's the way that it's done. So like, I'll give you a great example, and some people might find funny, some people might find it offensive. Like we used to film like all of our deer camps in the 80s and 90s, like all of our deer camps, right, on VHS, and you know, obviously we took a ton of pictures and stuff. And I remember vividly, like, if he won't listen to this, maybe he will. My Uncle Dave shot this 6-point in the mountains, Pennsylvania, on opening day, a rifle, and we, you know, that's a big deal for all of us. Like if we killed 1 or 2 bucks in camp out of whatever 14 guys back then, like in the early 90s, like substantial deal. And there's a picture of where they basically took the buck and they put it on the quad and they put the like camo or the orange hat on it and like dressed it up, basically riding around. Was funny at the time. I'm sure if people saw it, was funny at the time. Nobody knows.
I was there. It was funny.
Right? Yeah. Nobody knew. Like once he took it off the quad, right? Like nobody knew that it happened or existed. Fast forward to now, I do that thing I posted on social, lives forever, shared around thousands or hundreds of thousands of people see that thing. So it's just to the point of like, I'm sure guys may have taken those laying down shots back in the 90s all the time. How it's delivered, and I guess it's where it bothers me, because like I post all my deer pictures too. Like I'm proud of that, you know. Part of that to me is kind of a homage to the animal, but I don't see the need, or I guess I struggle to understand the need for them to post that. Is it attention? Like they just want attention when they do that?
You mean like to clarify, you're saying the need for them to post more of a shock value photo.
Yeah, more of a shock value photo.
And I think that I do think it's an attention thing. You know, like, and I think that's it's one thing. You know, we'll just like everybody in life has done questionable things in life, I would assume, you know, and except for Jared. But
face into a bulldozer. Yes, questionable.
But you know, so it's like everybody has done questionable things or whatever in life, and it used to be that pictures lived in your photo album, and that's one thing. You know, all of our moms have,
or they were never taken,
they were never taken.
Yeah.
All
literally, they're like, here. That's it.
Their memories.
All of our moms have disparaging photos of us.
Absolutely.
You know, so I'm not. You know, that's. If I go to my parents' house in Virginia right now and open up my mom's photo albums, there are things that'll never see the light of day.
Absolutely.
You know, so that's not necessarily illegal things, but nobody wants to see me at 4 years old running around. You know, that's how it is. You know, so I think that the world was a different place, and content that there's no way to interpret that. You know, it's kind of like texting. I guess that's a good analogy, right? Like I could text you, you know, you could ask me a question and I could just say no. Or if we're sitting here, I could be like, no, man. Like, or the response could be the same, but the context doesn't necessarily come off the right way. So while that photo may have been funny in the moment, and maybe you can understand it because you were there and you have that memory to keep and hold yourself, when you share it, it doesn't necessarily mean that the context is interpreted the way that you know it's interpreted, right? So like if you share it, let's say you share that photo example and you publicize that online, the people who view that, whether they're hunters or non-hunters, don't necessarily know whether you were doing that because you were being degrading of the animal, or whether because you guys were, what was actually going on was you were so excited and so happy about the moment that manifested itself in that way. And even though it's odd, it was an appreciation of the experience and the animal and the culmination of everything, right? But it's not going to come off that way.
The content,
And even if you write out this whole articulated story below it, most people aren't going to read it.
Shock value of the picture, and that's it.
Exactly. I don't agree, and I'm not saying this like, man, like I agree with where we are as a world. I think cell phones are, you know, and the way we disseminate content is like one of the craziest.
Oh, I agree.
Like worst things for society as a whole, but we have to live with it. Regardless.
It's not going anywhere.
Times are evolving, and unfortunately, you know, we are a small portion of society that needs to be very aware, whether you're an individual, a brand, a storyteller, an influencer, a creator, whatever you label yourself as, aware what we're publishing out there, you know, what we're putting out there to people who are doing that. And I'll bring that full circle, I feel like. But it's like when we go to tell stories as an organization, you know, as our team at Land Limited, you know, and our community at Outdoor Creatives, and we're talking about it, we're always thinking about, does this represent what we know to be true, and do we feel like we represent this? Can we articulate, is this a good representation for the communities involved, the people involved, the brands involved? Are we telling a story that brings longevity and long-term worth and value to the organization that we as a community, as the hunting community, can relate to? But also, if you're outside of that community and you see that, you're not feeling like we're discrediting or devaluing something that should be cherished. That we all do cherish, you know, which is the wildlife.
I would think that the hardest part of that is like portraying nuance of like the intricacies of our lifestyle. Because there are so many things, like you said, that we just do. Like, it's what we've always done. It's you know, we learned why a long time ago, like from our whoever influenced us to get into hunting or however we came about it. But to where now it's like, that's just what happens with any activity, anything. Those things become second nature, and we dive into, like, our conversation, like with Cody the other day was like, I would say some parts of it a lot of it was, I guess, based around the business and stuff. But if we were to have a conversation more about the intricacies of deer hunting and strategy, we had one with Bomar stuff the other day. It's like, you know, guys that are having success, that have done it for a long time, that have figured things out. I can only imagine, and I talked to like some of our employees at the ice cream and shop stuff, and they're like, I listened to your podcast. They're like, I don't really understand like anything that you're talking about. And I'm like, because to me, it's second nature, but I'm not intentionally trying to appeal to a non-hunting audience. I'm not trying to offend a non-hunting audience or say things that could be taken out of context. But I think like the best job that you guys could do would be to somehow catch everybody up to speed with like what's happening at a, for somebody that's thinking at a high level.
That's a good way of well,
it's super complicated. I don't know how you do it.
You mean like, so I guess like,
how do you get like a non-hunter to understand what's happening in a hunting film without slowing it down to the point where it's boring for?
I don't think so. I think it's about the tactfulness and the way you represent it, rather than like glorifying the final piece of that of that relationship with the animal. In the sense of, I feel like a lot of content, traditional content, we'll say, and by traditional I mean like, mid 90s to, like we've been outlining. I feel like a lot of that content's focused around just the harvest itself. Like there wasn't a lot that was, even the advertising was focused around the harvest itself. It wasn't focused around the effort that went in or the nostalgia that went in. Well, I don't necessarily...
The whole act, dude. Frankly, a lot of that, even because they knew that. And so it became like those guys didn't even... They weren't hunting their properties, or they were just hunting outfitters and killing stuff.
And I'm not saying that I think as a community we need to tailor every single piece of content that we publish out there and show like, hey, start to finish, you need, like, we're not directly speaking to non-hunters. Sure. I think we just need to be aware of how it's going to be interpreted.
Definitely. If they trip across that, how are they going to perceive this?
Exactly. And it's not, I consume, traditional hunting content still. Like I watch stuff like that because I'm a hunter and I understand and know what I'm interpreting and what I'm watching, and I'm not saying that there's not a medium for that, but even the hunting content that I digest now, whether it be, most of the hunting material, all of the hunting stuff I consume now outside of podcasts is YouTube, because the YouTube audience in general, I feel like, or at least the creators that I follow and invest in, are telling stories through the act of the pursuit itself, not necessarily just like, hey, look at me, we're going to go kill this giant deer. It's like, that's great, but do yourself and everybody else some justice and showcase the fact that the reason that you're so passionate about that is because you're investing so much time. It is a free country though, and I understand that, and I get that people can do whatever they want, but it's like, it's almost like the pot calling the kettle black, because and maybe this is a problem that'll never get solved, right? But rather, I think that it's another analogy. It's like the guy who only ever shoots small bucks and then complains that he doesn't ever shoot a big buck.
Sure,
it's the same thing. So it's like if you don't put your best foot forward from a communication standpoint out into the world, and understanding the way you're going to be perceived both by hunters and non-hunters alike, if you don't do that, you don't have a voice in the fight.
I think the hardest thing in that evolution was, in that mid 90s, early 90s, late 80s time frame, content existed in a consumption primarily within family and friend groups, right? Like not saying video necessarily, but just stories, pictures, history. That was deer camp, right? Like you would recite stories from 20 years ago. That was a content creator's, boiling pot in a deer camp. Even if a non-hunter came to a family function, they understood it because it was a different way of being able to be exposed to that, because here's a family that's talking about hunting in deer camp. Like I remember,
I think personally, not to interject, I think they're different things. I think you're talking about deer camp. And
no, I'm talking about just content in general. There was such a limited amount of commercialized content in the 90s.
No, there was though. It was magazines. So to contrast that,
but still
it was magazines.
Very limited.
No, everybody read lots of magazines.
I think there were magazines that I do think, but
stacks
I think
and stacks and stacks of magazines.
Maybe what Jeremy is talking about is going back to the way that how many avenues that content was being accessed. Like the content was the barrier to entry back in the day was really hard, right?
Sure.
To get content out there.
Absolutely.
So for example, to get content published in a magazine, which granted, that had its own challenges, but you were dealing with that. So it's almost like, because the barrier to entry now is so low, you can just create a Facebook account and publish a photo.
That's definitely true.
So there's, so because of that, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, social media, whether you're a brand, whether you're a person, whoever, it's almost like we've taken that freedom, and I'm not emphasizing that there should be a regulatory body or anybody that's policing these individuals, but rather more of a plea to outdoorsmen in my own community that say that it's like, I get and I support your freedoms to do whatever you so choose.
Portray us all in a good light is what we're all asking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because they'll never do it though.
Well, you're gonna have idiots everywhere.
I mean, we've had this conversation about, if there was a good thing with the outdoor channel, I'm not saying there was a bad thing, but if there was a really good thing about the outdoor channel,
I do like this conversation.
There was a quality assurance, right?
Well,
like you couldn't get
standard.
on. There was a standard, and there was still
whether
quality
it was
assurance.
right or wrong in terms of information.
Exactly. There was somebody was saying this is meeting standards, quality information that we are going to broadcast it nationally,
just like the news. They say, hey.
Exactly.
Here's the news. Read the news.
Not saying it's all accurate, but somebody approved it.
Yeah.
Now there is none. It's a free for all.
Right.
Yeah.
You have public independent thinking, which is super beneficial for
it's also super dangerous.
Learning, for progress. It's also potentially dangerous. Well, it leaves it in the public's court to decipher for themselves what's true and what's not.
And do you like that?
Well, I mean, I would agree that it could be potentially dangerous and that a lot of people don't have the ability to differentiate, but who does is where I draw the line.
Here's where I think the best way to take that is I don't think, once again, I'll put my foot down and say there shouldn't be like a regulatory body that
Well, first of all, we all agree.
Yeah.
We're saying with what you're saying,
yeah.
We want hunters to not post things in a poor light that we could all be perceived as a negative thing. We agree.
And really just like publishing content that like a poor light or something that, I mean, we all have moments where it's like you are experiencing something that's like for your eyes to experience.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Lone Wolf Custom Gear.
Man, Jared, we are tree stand fanatics, and I think the one thing that we have learned over all these years is to kill big bucks, we got to be mobile. We've been hunting out of Lone Wolves for many years, the original Lone Wolf, and then obviously with the custom gear stuff, we're using the 0.5 and the 0.75. Yeah. And the one thing that we talked about is like, what if there were no cables? Here we are.
I really just don't know how you can beat it, frankly. But, a lot of that came, too, from a relationship that we've built with the DePustos. We've had both Cody and Andre on the podcast a few times. The passion for hunting, the outlook on the sport and stuff, I think is eye to eye with how we look at it. Everything that has gone into building this brand and to building these tree stands is something that we want to be a part of.
This is the 40th anniversary of these guys creating tree stands that have been critical to how we hunt whitetail deer today. If you look over the past, you'll see Andre's designs being implemented across so many stands over the years. Such a cool thing, but really has changed the way that we all hunt whitetail deer from above now.
Right now, you can use code HUNTR, HUNTR, to get 7% off anything on the entire website. Be the Lone Wolf.
Do you guys remember 1 or 2 years ago, the two PA kids that were they filmed themselves beating the crap out of a buck that they had wounded, just like punching it, beating it with stick, and then they posted it to social media, and everybody was like, "What the hell are you doing?"
Yeah, including hunters. Yeah, super distasteful.
That's
what you're talking about.
They thought it was cool, right? And I don't know what ended up happening to them, but I mean, it was a giant deal. It had millions and millions of views because it was so over the top that not just hunters who were deer hunting were consuming it. Everybody that loves wildlife, or hell, half those people barely even see deer, and they're like, "This is wrong," and it was
terrible.
Yeah. It was a terrible thing. But that one thing absolutely put a dent in the armor of hunters.
And even in let's create a hypothetical scenario. Let's assume there's a situation that occurs where you're an outdoorsman, you are on a hunt, you make a poor shot, you track the animal until it's like almost expired, but like you feel like it's your responsibility to put it out. You look down at your gun and, oh man, I'm out of ammunition or whatever, and you choose to go about a much more brutal, but what you feel like in that moment is a
ethical decision.
An ethical
moral
decision to put that animal out of its misery. That doesn't necessarily
nothing comes to mind.
That doesn't necessarily mean that that's something that should be
publicized or shown.
Correct.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yes.
you know,
Well, we've even seen a dude, even as something as simple as like a follow-up shot. It's just like, I didn't need to see that.
no,
And if I'm feeling that way, understanding the situation completely, having been in it, yeah, what is the non-hunting community? How are they going to perceive that?
yeah, exactly. And I think that it's not that, you know, going back to the whole thing, I don't want to, I hate like the social media, the way social media interacts with the hunting community, the outdoor community right now, with flagging everything and taking content down and not allowing organizations to be free and allowing people to express themselves the way they want to,
And conservatives in general.
Conservatives in general, you know, but I think that it's not a regulatory body's responsibility to manage that. It's the responsibility of the creators and the leaders within the community to publicize content that showcases the way we the way we want people to go. And I think that's it's the responsibility of the brands that steer our industry, whether they, you know, a lot of times I think that organizations have the tendency to be like, well, we don't control the consumers, they do whatever they do. And it's like, well, they look to you for guidance.
Yeah, you're not steering them.
The people that you support, the people that the medians that you are spending dollars in, those things have ripple effects. And the same thing goes for creators. It goes for people like myself. It goes for influencers. All of those things have ripple effects. And I think that it's as a community of storytellers, you know, be it whatever the role is you play, from brand to small time YouTuber, it's your job effectively when you have attention from whatever that may be to be accountable so that the people who do follow know how to represent themselves.
What's prompting the discussion? I mean, are there things out there that you're feeling like?
Yeah, I think that it's just like, I think I feel like our space, the hunting community right now, and this podcast, you know, does a great job at touching on like the volatility and the risk associated with what's going on in hunting right now. Like you guys do a really good job at addressing the challenges we face. And
Or trying to understand it for ourselves because we don't know.
Exactly. So whether it be access oriented, right? Like you can't go knock on somebody's door the same way you used to, whether that's because a lot of land is being hunted or just because some guy or gal saw a thing on Facebook or YouTube and they own
literally a thread of anti-hunter.
And then, you know, that kind of thing. I think that, you know, I would hope that organizations take more of an interest in storytellers in general at articulating more than just the harvest itself. And I think there's people out there that are doing it, but it's still the smaller collective percentage of individuals in comparison to.
I don't know if you know, Jake, we're going 4 years here. We haven't shown a single harvest.
Oh yeah.
They've happened, but we haven't shown them.
Well, yeah. But once again, you guys are communicating things in a long form medium, so people can understand who you are,
it's
your
helpful.
feelings, your backgrounds, the fact that you're investing so much time and effort and money and diligence into the process. You know, whether you get lucky on the first day of season or you spend 60 days in the stand a year. You know, that can be gathered from this, right?
Yeah, and I think, you know, going back to your point of, and I agree, in the 90s and stuff, tons of people, reading North American Whitetail, deer and deer hunting.
That was definitely it.
Yeah, those were the ones. That said, I think, and we've said this numerous times on here, one of my biggest issues around it, and I think it spurs into everything else we're talking about, is the desensitivity to big bucks. Back when those magazines were disseminated across the hunter's landscape, when you got that buck picture or that cover picture, you were just like, you couldn't believe something like that exists.
Is the word.
Yeah, it was just, you're mind blown. Like, you're just flipping through these pages like, this is just, could you imagine seeing that? And now I see it every day, every hour of, you know, it's there all the time.
Well, it's a few things. The desensitization of big bucks. That's social media and content in general, and trail cameras.
Sure,
that's what did it. I mean, the realization that like, holy crap, they're there.
Yep,
we didn't have pictures of them before.
It demystified the situation.
But I think even more
in a big way.
I think even more so, like somewhere along in the process of content that was created around big bucks, and I'll preface this by saying I am just as happy for a guy who shoots a small buck as I am the same guy who will go out and intentionally chase a big buck if I know that he's there. So I am chasing big deer, but that's not because I don't believe somebody else should not be able to shoot small deer.
Absolutely.
Everybody has the opportunity and should do whatever they want to do, so I'll get in front of that. But somewhere along the line, we took that prioritization of like the ability to chase a big deer and said, this is the only right way.
So that piggyback off of that, because when we go back to those 90s films and stuff, Real Tree Monster Bucks and stuff, they were killing giant bucks. They were killing big bucks, right? But monster bucks. Monster bucks. They were so rare to the average hunting public, right? That it was you weren't offended by it or you weren't off put by it. You were envious. You were just
fantasy.
Like, it's amazing. Like could you imagine hunting? My dad said it first time I took him to Kansas. He's like, you remember all those years us watching Kansas, and we're here hunting it, right? So they were doing it, but it was a healthy envy of it. Now, to your point, I think it's very unhealthy.
Well, I think what's happened is we've gone, going back to the sliding scale, right? It's always a tug of war, so it's we've used the antler as a way to sell stuff for so long that now it's the community's interest that like where I feel like the general public's, I don't want to use this as a blanket statement. I think there are either there is a large percentage of people in the general public that feel this way, or the ones that do are just really vicious keyboard warriors that make a lot of money.
And when you say general public, you talking hunting or like actual general public?
We'll talk hunting.
Okay.
General public meaning regarding the hunting community. So I think that either that's, and it could be just that the keyboard warriors are so aggressive that you see people constantly devaluing other people's experiences because of the fact that they're prioritizing just the size and caliber.
How so? In what way? How's that manifested?
Just for example, like you'll see like a kid post he'll harvest a deer or even an adult. I've had close buddies have harvested their first buck and it's a 2.5-year-old, and instead of the congratulations, I mean we've all experienced it. It's
you get shame from that.
Yeah.
There's a level of shaming. Do we still see that? Like
I think it's all over Facebook.
I still see a lot of it. I do see it, not necessarily trying to figure out how to do it. I do see it the other way, but I still think it's an unhealthy envy. Like between public and private is still a big thing of like, I never would hunt private land and deer like that and stuff. And it's like, yeah, you would.
We're still seeing...
If you were given the opportunity, like if I said, hey, here's 230 acres in Ohio, I've got food plots and whatever stands, like nobody's hunted it this year. You have access. You would hunt it. Maybe, you wouldn't say, no, I'm just going to hunt public.
Maybe the conversation is like kind of shifting, the more I think about it as we talk, maybe the conversation is shifting more towards, I think that it seemed like back in the day, and we'll talk about, before I was born, when my dad was out hunting, or doing things, whether he was just squirrel hunting or doing whatever they were going to do, everybody was just happy that you were out having a good time and just enjoying yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that somewhere along the line, social media and I think it's a culmination, right? It's a perfect storm of, as an industry, as a community, we started to value, instead of the experience and the opportunity with the animal, we started to value just the rack. There's been a big push. There was a push for that.
Was it? So social media. I was a freshman in college in 2003.
We need an old guy to tell us.
Well, I was a freshman in college in 2003, and I was in the first 100,000 Facebook users at that time.
Whoa, that's big.
They send you something for that?
Well, Penn State was like one of the ones that came on fast.
Well, that was MySpace.
You should get
I never did have a MySpace, which was funny.
I did.
But I had it. 2003 was Facebook. So I'm just trying to timeline this thing because it's very intriguing to me in that, like, again,
I can see it. The timeline.
Monster bucks were killing monster bucks.
When was monster bucks? What year?
I mean, that was through the 90s.
Mid 90s?
I mean, I think my first deer camps, let's see, our first
You're
deer,
34, right?
32.
32. I'm 31. Jeremy's 40.
So similar time frame. So my first deer camps were when I was 8, I think, so 2000-ish. And we were watching, even like 3-4 years prior to that, I can remember watching like conventional hunting TV, because even though
Yes.
we weren't investing into hunting, it was on, and there was Allure, like
On a channel.
And
on
that
the
was
channel,
that
on
was
TV,
TNN,
like
because I was
watching In Fisherman,
Yeah.
on Saturday morning.
because I was 90,
I remember that.
95, 96 was the first year I hunted. So I was 12. So,
was
but I
3.
went to camp when I was, 9 and 10. So, but still 94, 95, 96, that time frame was the TNN Sunday nights, only during the fall, right? Like the hunting season came off. Yeah. Q3, Q4 stuff. So that went through, I graduated college or high school in 03. So somewhere right there was the break point.
Who was
That
on
03
TNN? Like who was?
It was Buckmasters with Jackie Bushman.
Jackie Bushman.
It was Bill Jordan, Realtree Outdoors.
Bill Durden,
It was Mossy Oaks Hunting the Country with Cuz.
Strickland. Okay.
It might have been just those three.
I have a question. Who was before them? Who was publishing?
Wenzel Brothers.
Who was publishing hunting
Yeah.
content?
Well, there was
pre that?
books
Gene and Barry.
and
well,
magazine contributors.
I mean, like Bow Hunting October Whitetails,
Yep.
the Wenzel, amazing, which was a VHS, now a DVD. Amazing content.
Yep.
So I think maybe when I'm
Chuck
Babe
Adams.
Winkleman.
when I think about like the nostalgia, I'm thinking now. I think that there's justification for why that late '90s, early 2000s content was the way it was, and how I don't necessarily think that content specifically was. I think it was the example that the industry took and said, "Hey, we can make money off of this." I'm not blaming those guys for anything.
No,
but I think when I talk
that's what
about,
happens,
when I
dude.
talk about the nostalgia, I'm talking about the storytellers pre that, like that type of content, like the early
It was
stuff.
like
Like
Fred
the Indians.
Bear. It was Fred Bear. Like if Fred Bear had a pile of books and magazine articles and stuff like that. There was a bunch. J. Wayne Fears was another guy who wrote for a long time. You had those guys, but like, and again, I'm 40. If I had to say like who were like the beginning influencers,
like the forefathers.
it was Bill Jordan, it was Jackie Bushman, it was Cousin Toxie.
I mean, you could go.
I mean, those were
all
really
of it
the
has some
three.
level of nostalgia.
Drury's were doing stuff
Well,
at that
definitely.
there's
time.
nostalgia there. I think, I mean, nostalgia for those of us who understand what we're watching,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and I'm not, once again, not placing blame or anything on those guys. Like I grew up watching that stuff. I think it's just a matter of like, we as a community, we have context for what those moments mean when we see that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, those guys were influenced.
That's what
and fell
makes
in-
it nostalgic.
Exactly.
You have some connection
Those
to it.
guys, and
Yep.
the reason they're so passionate and continue to be passionate about it is because of the fact that they grew up invested in the Polaroid wall at your local deer
Absolutely.
processor, like those kinds of things.
Yeah.
The emotional connection to whitetail hunting, and it's I think that's the the thing that I hope that we can continue to create content that embodies the story and the mission of why we all actually like to hunt, regardless of the size of the deer or the caliber
Yeah.
of the wildlife
No,
that
we
we're
would agree.
pursuing. And I would as somebody who's still continuing to grow in the space himself, I feel like I would hope that I could speak freely and be like, I hope that our community as outdoorsmen and as an industry and as creators can kind of look at themselves and go, what's the foot that I'm putting forward, and what kind of content am I creating? And if you're a brand, understand that people act and follow because of the representation that you put out into the world, right? So if you steer our community towards something based on $1,
Mm-hmm.
there's ripple effects for that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately we live in a world where, money is king, and I understand that. I mean, we all got to make a living,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, it's like,
What do you think of? You know who Matt Ranella is?
yeah.
You listen to the Hunt Quietly podcast and stuff. You subscribe to any of his like ideas?
I have conflict with Matt.
Are you familiar with the
Yeah,
process?
oh,
Do you
yeah.
know what he's kind of trying to put out there?
Yeah, where I feel, well,
For people
and you
for
can-
people that don't, and you can elaborate. He basically is against like monetization of hunting. Basically, he's saying that
He's the anti-influencer.
He's saying that the manufacturers that we're supporting with our dollars are investing, via sponsorship dollars, paying people to promote hunting, which is directly hurting our chances of having a better hunting experience. He's saying it's like basically a vicious cycle, and they're bad.
I don't necessarily agree. I don't agree with the fact that I don't agree with that necessarily. I feel like if I was going to agree with Matt on a point, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, because I listened to his podcast with you guys, and I've listened to the Hunt Quietly podcast several times, is there's a feeling of misrepresentation of the hunting community from the state level, meaning, as far as where license purchases go, as far as where the interest is in, he's a big advocate of he's very elaborative when it comes to clarifying that, as a hunting community, we're so focused on grading our worth by the total number of license purchasers that we're aiming for a certain number. And then when we do get that individual, we're throwing them to the wind and saying, good luck out there. And we're not providing the
quality
resources
of the
and the quality of the experience that we all fell in love with when we were kids, because we had mentors. And it's like, whether
we had access,
whether you're talking about it from, a DEI perspective or from just an anyone perspective, you're taking new hunters that oftentimes are likely don't have mentors. And if you are going to sell them on the opportunity to provide for themselves and hunt, you need to invest dollars into making sure that the retention is there.
Completely
it's like
agree.
Everybody talks about R3, and I feel like the retention part is the part that's the hardest part for Matt Rinella to pull to grasp, because it, and I'm not saying that states that they're not making, maybe they are making an effort, but it's really hard to see from my perspective.
Well, what does that even look like? Like, who quits hunting when they have access and are having an awesome experience? Outside of personal reasons, if you have family obligation,
or aging,
or aging out,
sure. Maybe financial complications. Maybe it's the cost of the investment to get into it.
But I would say very little. If you have access and you're having a good experience, heck, I still have 30 shells laying around from when I was 15 years old, probably, in my house rolling around.
I don't think that, going back to the whole, like, putting money into the industry. I mean, ultimately we live in a world that's, if you're going to fight the fight, you got to have, you have a dog and fight kind of thing like that. So it's like, if we're by creating opportunity in our space, whether it's through industry or through supporting influencers or creators or YouTubers or podcasts or TV shows, you are helping perpetuate and provide value in the long term to the argument that we're creating value to economy. But I do think that it's more of like it's imploring people to think about the opportunity that they're being given.
Yeah, the comment we hear a lot, and I get where they're coming from, and in some cases they're not wrong, is, and I do fear long term, is that hunting will become a rich man's game, quote. Like that, we hear that very often.
Clearly is.
I don't think it is. I think it's still it's still very feasible to be a successful hunter and not be rich. Absolutely.
I think you can.
I'm not rich, but like I can be successful
compared to a lot of people. You are.
Well, let's clarify that though. What do we define? Because like to say that, we have to define what we mean as a hunter.
Just opportunity in general. I think contrast it to like a generation ago. My uncle is my best comparison. He'll tell me about how it was in his day, which would have been the 70s and 80s.
You have access everywhere.
They had access everywhere. There wasn't they wanted to shoot big bucks, but that was just kind of like becoming possible because the equipment was just getting there. Like, but pre bow hunting, whitetails. It was just, they had gun seasons. For the most part. Right? Like nobody bow hunted.
Is very low numbers of bow hunters in the 80s.
Very low. Well, 80s? I would say even maybe a little bit before that.
Oh, yeah. 70s and 80s.
60s, 70s,
just building up.
Very few
90s was really when the boom started for archery.
Everybody bow hunted.
And I think that's regionally specific, too, because, like, even in the South, like, where I grew up, it was very taboo. Like
for bow hunting?
Oh, yeah. Like, it felt, there were people who did it. Like, you have the Florida Bow Hunter Association, you had state bow hunter associations or clubs.
Yeah, but small numbers.
Very small numbers. And, like, when we you know, I mean, you have states like South Carolina and, you know, that have
your gun season opens
in August, I think it is.
Yeah.
You know?
So why bow hunt at that point?
And, you know, even for us in North Carolina, you know, we open in, there's 3 phases in the state. On the eastern side of the state, I think, you know, some level of firearm, whether, you know, if you consider a muzzleloader, you know, some level of firearm, that's, you know, late October.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, you know, so you're dealing with, you know, bow hunting was taboo for a long time. And I think it's more the norm now, but there seems to be just like this weight that's carried with, I don't know. I feel like that as a community, I think that sometimes we prioritize the wrong things. You know, when it comes to, you know, or we don't give context to why we're prioritizing those things.
Go back to your uncle in the rich man's comment.
Okay.
Is it purely access?
That's a big part of it. Huge. Yeah. I think that was what gave everybody the impression of feeling like I can bow hunt, is when the equipment got of a certain quality, it was no problem to go out and get permission because there were so few people doing it.
Yep.
So, you know, my uncle would say like, dude, you didn't even ask permission. You just, you know, it was fine. It was understood that you could just go and it was just property. Like the lines were just whatever. And nobody cared. And but if there was a problem, you know, you ask them, or it was all like kosher. Obviously, I mean, a lot has transpired since that time, but so call it like the 90s to now, the 2020s. Leasing is certainly a huge part of that.
Yeah, but something had to spur for leasing to really.
Oh yeah, I mean,
drive.
it was caused by things. But if I look at it and say literally what's limiting access now, it would be leasing, outfitting, and people purchasing land and keeping
purely
people
for
off.
recreational.
And undoubtedly, it was motivated by antler size, yeah, for sure. And I mean, a lot of other things that came with the promotion of it.
I do think that people were interested in having a controlled experience because they saw television, they saw people having these really unique opportunities that they weren't having at larger caliber deer, or, you know, maybe a guy who'd go out in the woods and see 4 deer a season. He's watching people on TV, regardless of the caliber of deer they're harvesting, seeing, you know, like Milk River, Montana, you know, which I grew up watching the guys hunt out there, and you see $75 in a field.
Yeah, through an alfalfa field.
And you know, you think about like, well, how can I turn my Kentucky farm into that? You know, or can I go get a lease and have a better opportunity?
Well, see, and I could be wrong, but I don't think that really started until like getting into the 2000s.
Had to be.
Maybe, I mean,
because before that, I'm going to say 90s. Again, I was born in 93, so I mean, my memory on this, somebody can correct us, but like before it was killing big bucks was like cool. It was like, can you kill a buck every year? Like, and if guys were doing that with a bow, like you were highly regarded as like a really good bow hunter. Didn't really matter the size. Like, could you kill a legal buck every year?
Yeah. And I think
those are guys now that are like in their 50s and 60s, early 60s.
For sure. I mean, and I'm trying to think about, you know, where, you know, it's.
I don't think people could relate it. I think when people saw TV, I don't think they understood that like that could be my farm, especially here in the Northeast or in the South where you're at. It was just kind of a thing.
I don't necessarily know if I 100% agree. I think that I don't think that they thought that they could have the exact experience, but rather they could give their best attempt at creating that experience for themselves
on their own property, or go to where they are.
A combination of both, I think, maybe.
I would say more than the latter. I think guys were like, okay, I'm going to go on an outfitted hunt. That was big for a long time. I mean, probably still is, outfitted hunts and stuff. But
yeah, I think that's a conversation in and of itself, in its own discussion.
See, because it would have been publications like, Jeremy, maybe you can chime in here. I'm thinking like, I mean, in my generation, it was like Midwest Whitetail. It was Growing Deer with Grant Woods. It was QDMA. It was,
like
you know, what were the
publications? Deer and deer hunting. Deer and deer hunting. And North American Whitetail were the two.
In North American Whitetail. Those were the ones that started to be like, here's how you can potentially have this for yourself where you hunt.
Yep. Yeah. Those were the two big ones.
And I think maybe for me, you know, growing up, I was more, I mean, we would get the North American whitetails, but growing up, I was more influenced by Outdoor Life and Field and Stream and the print articles that got publicized in there, which were much more adventure driven.
Yeah, right? Story-based.
They're story-based. So, you know, and even when I would get the chance to pick up a North American whitetail, or, you know, like we used to lease land in Georgia when I was a kid. And Georgia has Georgia Outdoor News, and they would publicize stories about, you know, guys who harvested big bucks in Georgia, you know, and it was always this long form story about what, you know, what transpired and how the evolution occurred and what happened, versus like, you know,
tips and tactics.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even, yes, I think that's part of it, but even more so, it's like, I feel like we glaze over a lot of the emotion side of it now.
Sure.
And instead we're just like, you know, if you flip on a show or whatever, or a random YouTube channel that was influenced by those early hunt formats, it's based on like, they might show a couple B-roll clips of somebody working a farm, but they're not given context. They're just like, you know, it's just filler that gets them to the fact that they're in the tree stand. And then it's, you know, 12 minutes of watching deer in a field, and then ultimately a shot on a whitetail, you know, that's a large caliber animal. It's
such a hard thing to grasp, because like I'm going back now. Primetime Bucks was the other one, which was Hunter Specialties back in the day, paying pro staff to go out and kill deer. And if you kill deer and it made the video, you got even more money. Like that was their job. And it, obviously they were promoting products in that stuff. But like, if you watch those, they were very much, you know, 20 hunts clammed into this 2-hour VHS. But nobody, like, even at the time, like, it was that, like, healthy envy. It was like, you know, this guy's hunting Kansas, this guy's hunting Illinois, and it was like, man, this is unbelievable. Something I, like, couldn't imagine. And there, at some point, and maybe it was just the mass quantity of media of that time, but at some point, that same type of content changed the trajectory of hunting as we know it. Even though those guys were kind of doing the same thing, because there were so few of them and it was so limited to like, these were the options. So like, you know, the 14 million whitetail hunters in the US, like these were the things that you could watch, like that were out there from a media standpoint. It wasn't enough to change the trajectory of how we hunt, how our family treats hunting, how non-hunters view hunting. But then as media expanded, late 90s, early 2000s. I was just looking. Dream Season's first one was 2004, which would have been Outdoor Channel. So sometime that 2002, 2004 timeframe. It so much of it happened that it changed hunters' mindset to go, oh, we need to do this. Before that, it was more of like, it was a dream. Like those were the things that I just dreamed of seeing that buck come across the cornfield in Pennsylvania. I didn't have to be in Illinois, right? I didn't think that I was ever going to grow a buck like that. It was just like that could happen where I'm at. When the mass content, when it seemed like when more people started to do it, I think that was all of a sudden we're like, well, I guess I should do this too. HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Pure Wildlife Blends.
Yeah, buddy. We're doing a lot of food plots this year. It seems like the planning, the preparation, like the coordinating for getting everything, you know, in the ground, is like it just never ends.
Yeah, and I just got off an 18-hour bender where I'm on multiple farms getting everything ready. But this year, fortunately, we've got Pure Wildlife Blends, which is Jeff Sturgis. Who better to partner with for our food plot program than a guy who's got 30 years of experience, been on thousands of farms. I mean, the guy lives and breathes food plots.
Yeah, and so the blends themselves are all handpicked by Jeff, and it's like, man, we've had a lot of conversations with him over the years, and he's been pretty influential on how we set up farms and stuff. And frankly, you know, the product, it's in a name, it's Pure Wildlife Blend. So a lot of these other seeds that you see that are blue and orange and all these things, it's because they're coated with lime and they're dyed, and it's marketing at the end of the day. So we have a lot of confidence in the seeds that Jeff has chose, and that's what we're going to be planting this year. And so right now, you can use code HUNTR10 for 10% off anything on the website.
So if you're looking for switch, clover, brassica, or Jeff's favorite, layer in the rye.
Layer in the rye.
Yep. Check out purewildlifeblends.com.
If you don't mind, I want to take a step in, like, for because I feel like we're covering. It's a deep conversation, and
we're trying to put ourselves in like a lot of different shoes at once. And
yeah,
I'm following the timeline a little bit.
Well,
here.
and to give you know, as far as, especially with, you know, myself being a guest, I think that what I'm trying to talk, what I'm curious, what I'm enjoying talking about with you all, and what I'm hoping that people get out of this conversation, is that we should be analytical about what we're publishing.
Sure.
We should be aware, and where we're at in this conversation is let's look at the timeline of media, and let's be cognizant of our representation as a community. We are, as an organization that produces that media for the organizations we produce it for, and how we publicize it, and the messaging that we're publicizing. And we're not saying that anybody shouldn't be able to do a format for creating content, but rather that whether you're a TV show, a YouTube influencer, a general person on Instagram, that you should be thinking about making sure that we're conveying the messaging that made us all fall in love with the activity that we're doing, rather than the thing that is going to sell something that we have been structured to produce. You know, and I think when you and a good example of that is the success that a show like Meat Eater has had, and the success that channels like THP have had. And I think that the reason that those channels have had success, not that they don't show harvests, because they do, but they also lean heavily on the same reason, and the feelings and the nostalgia and the reality that produced why we're all here in the first place. And that type of content, you know, is easier for both. I think people are hungry for more of it, you know.
Check this out. You might find this interesting. You're right. Those are both really successful channels. Like, they have a lot, from the outside looking in it appears they have a lot of viewership. They have accrued a lot of eyeballs. They've impacted a lot of people. I don't watch either of them.
Sure. I'm not saying that you do.
I'm just saying, me personally, I'm like, boy, I clearly think a lot about that. Like, we do this a lot. My group, I'm like, nothing against those guys. We've had Aaron on. I mentioned Matt. I mean, he's anti-Meat Eater, but I don't, it's just not for me. There's nothing, and it's kind of the line we were talking earlier of like, can you appeal to both? Can you?
Well, but here's my thought is would you, so I guess the question that I would have is, because you understand the context of what went into the harvest of a big deer, you're interested in getting to that point faster, or when you are interested in digesting content, like maybe a Grant Woods, you're interested in digesting that content for a very specific reason.
It's a fair question.
That's right.
You're not asking it, but I'm going to tell you the answer. Of like, so.
I mean, I feel like I'm alluding to it.
You're getting it. What I'm implying, and what I would try to get across, of like, I'm like, if I ask, like, what is good content? What is out there that I'm like, I can really praise, and I think it's like really awesome? There's not a lot of it, frankly. It's like, I find myself watching stuff more because it's there than like I'm snacking. It's not like, oh, I have this awesome feast of hunting content that I'm like, I'm super enjoying. I mean, you run down through the list, and there's guys that I respect and enjoy. It's like, I still like some of the Midwest Whitetail stuff I'll check out. Like, I still tune into Bill Winke stuff because I like him.
Because in fall, outside of fall, it's a drought, right? So you got to scratch the itch. So you're...
Yeah. Well, and even... yeah, I mean, it's just, dude, there's not a lot, frankly, like when you get into it.
Well, see, what's weird about, not to interrupt you, Jake.
No, go ahead.
Like, I actually watch THP, not because I'm relatable to it, but I enjoy it
because you know those guys.
Well, it's also nostalgic for me because that's how I grew up hunting.
But see, that's the point. It's fun. And once again, not taking away from the interest in harvesting a big mature deer and getting to that point quick in something that maybe you would be more.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and I would say I'm inclined to do that. I've definitely clicked forward to see an animal get harvested. I have done that. Everybody has done that, but that's not what I'm looking for out of it necessarily.
Is it a relatability?
It's a storytelling aspect. I'm looking to be captivated by a story.
So what would be an example of something that you watched? You know, because to me, it sounds like you're saying conventional content, being like YouTube and TV, doesn't really appeal to you. But what does appeal to you might be more longer form brand style, Yeti film style content.
Well,
is that the type of
if I could point to a piece, like, and we've had him on, I'm sure you are familiar with Donnie Vincent stuff.
Yeah,
like,
he's great. He's a huge pillar for everything that we and a lot of other creators do. And
it's not like, oh, I would watch that every day. Like in different seasons, like there have been times where I'm like, if we have a North Dakota trip coming up, I'm going to just dive into a YouTube hole and watch every North Dakota hunt that I can. And that appeals to me because I'm like, I'm going to be,
and we found some great content that we didn't even know existed.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to, it's just like no name channels or whatever. But, in terms of long form structured content, like I would look at The Rivers Divide is like an impactful film, something that tactically covered the storyline, also had the kill shot that everybody wants. It was just like, well done.
And I understand.
And there's been other pieces. You know, I mean, I obviously that sounds like
and I
cliche to just say that.
I understand too that not everybody has the time to create The Rivers Divide. Johnny dedicated 3 seasons?
Who does?
At least 3 seasons.
A long time. So for people who are like,
I get it.
People who are like, well, Jacob Hell, like, you know, how am I supposed to, like, TV show is my livelihood? How am I supposed to create content? It's like, well, I hear you. I'm not saying that you can't. I'm just saying think about the story that you're telling each episode outside of the harvest. In addition to that,
I would say Heartland Bowhunter does a nice job.
Heartland does do a good job
of a more attainable but still very high quality focus on storytelling type of an approach.
I agree. I'm trying to think.
I'm sure I'm leaving people out.
Well, there's a guy, I'll give a quick YouTube shout out there. They rarely publish, but I think it's called Behind the Bow on YouTube.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Those guys.
Yep.
I really enjoy.
They Pennsylvania guys?
I don't remember.
I really enjoy their videos.
I'm not sure.
Just because like it's this really fun mix of entertainment and nostalgia and being able to put myself in that position, and also they're chasing big deer. Like it feels almost like I'm in deer camp with them. You know.
Yep.
Remember there's a YouTube film, Game of Inches?
Oh, I remember Game
Who
of
did that
Inches
one?
well.
That was really good.
Yeah, Game of Inches was
Kevin,
great.
who we had in the other day from
Geeks.
Trad Geeks, they did some really good films.
There's been a few that I've tripped over. There was an A&F one I followed for a while that was really good. What's the other guy that you watch from out west? String Stalker?
Yeah, South Cox.
South Cox.
Again, I cling more, I think, to the personalities. And like I appreciate people's outlooks on it, and it shows through. I think they do a nice job with the content too. And I'm like, you know,
but I think the point I'm making is the reason you cling to that is the same reason Jeremy and I are clinging to watching like something with THP. It's just you're clinging to a different part of that same thing. It's like we may relate to something that's a little bit different, but the mission that's being accomplished is the same end goal, right? And there's a clear defining line between that type of content and conventional, like, I'm just going to go out and shoot something content.
Yeah. There's the other example I would use is Whitetail Adrenaline. Especially like some of the early Whitetail Adrenalines that were kind of chronologically based, that took you through.
Well, and that's basically like, if you're going to put them on a spectrum, that's like hunting public style, but it takes them a year or two to produce them. So it's got a lot more production effort put into it. It has more of a story.
So then if we were to go from, you know, like, I would say low production value carbon TV episode to, you know, Donnie Vincent at the far end of that spectrum.
Well, Carbon TV is a platform.
Meaning, like, I'm just not naming a name. I'm
just
referring
like
to like just a general.
Just some show.
Name a name.
No, I'm not
Put a show together.
Who do you think really sucks?
Well, but but there are some below that, I would say, not in a rude way, but like I find myself, especially like, I don't know, end of October, November, when I've kind of binged a lot, that I'll just start finding random videos from like whatever, Pennsylvania Rut or Illinois Rut, of guys who have 5 subscribers, but they made a video and they put it on YouTube. It may have little to no production value, but within context of what I'm doing at that time, it's very relevant.
There are a lot of guys that, I mean, if you were to compile it, it probably makes up as much or more of like the notable ones of just guys who have put films together.
Lots.
And have done a really nice job.
Lots of them. Yeah.
Obviously, I can't remember like them off the top of my head, but there's a lot of decent production stuff, and you just never know what you're going to get. It's like, I will say there have been films that I guess in a way I am looking for a successful harvest, because it's like, man, if they're not a super interesting person, or I'm intrigued by the storyline right away, like I'm going to jump forward and see if they killed anything. And if they didn't, I just don't watch the video.
Well, and going back to the value of having so many opportunities to digest content, that you can find a person like that relates for you, and I can find a person that relates for me, and Jeremy can find a person that relates for him. You know, I just think that, you know, I think the core root of the conversation is identifying that as a community, we are responsible for the way that the individuals that we see on social media are conducting themselves.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like, you know, whether we are
We're with you on that.
Yeah, whether we're directly responsible or whether we're directly responsible or whether we're indirectly responsible, it's our role to then say, like, you know, we're being given.
Yeah, as a community, hey, let's hold ourselves to a standard.
Exactly.
That's how we look.
And that standard goes from whether you're telling the story on a TV show or you're telling the story for over the course of 3 seasons, you know, to produce a giant form film, you know, you're telling that story for more than just the audience of the people that you're directly selling to. You're telling that story so that future people, new people that you know, they can get into the activity and invest in what we're doing in the pursuit, but also you're trying to captivate the existing audience as well.
So without naming names, like it just summarize, like what would you consider bad content?
Bad content?
Yeah, what's being put out there that if it was up in your mind
asking myself
to say,
that. I mean, it's not
like,
really.
What would you rather not see?
You're seeing it individually, like on social media. You're seeing people post insensitive stuff.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, I think that the format that there are times where as an industry, I feel like people are investing in the wrong formats to best.
Oh, every day.
You know,
so not necessarily content that's potentially hurtful to us. It's just what's being put out is maybe much of the same.
Maybe more along the lines of it's unintentionally steering the community, hunting community, the wrong direction.
Yep.
Without the like, once again, it's a
just
weird,
like in a purely antler driven type of a thing.
Yeah, it's a weird conversation to have because, you know, I'm not saying that like. I'm saying that it's so ingrained in who we are that it might not even be intentional. Yeah. It might be just the assumption is like, well, we need to allocate dollars to this.
Sure.
So they go out and find somebody and they allocate dollars to it without realizing that you're perpetuating something that's not creating long-term value in the changing world that we're in.
Also, dude, like this conversation is like based on like expecting marketing companies to know what they're doing.
Well, but see,
dude, we see people every day in the outdoor industry giving money to like stuff we think is bullcrap.
Well, and
we're like, what are you doing? And they're like, it's a great show.
To be clear, I'll preface this because I can already just hear like the haters being like, oh, he just wants to be able to he wants brands to give more money to him. It's like, well, we're trying to shift.
Well, yes,
we're trying to, but
that's because you feel like you're really making a valid effort to like paint everybody in a good light. What you're talking about here.
Well, going back to the beginning of the conversation, when we talked about like biting off more, that we are lucky enough to have incredible partners that believe in the stories and the missions that we're trying to tell and bring opportunities to us. We're shifting away from creating more and more content and rather creating more targeted, more meaningful material on a long-term basis. So this isn't a pitch for me to be like, hey, everybody in the industry, come give me your brand dollars.
Are you able to talk about this Hoyt film at all? Or
I mean, we're working on a Hoyt film. These gentlemen are involved. That's about as much as I don't want to. I mean, you know,
if you can, you can. It's okay.
According to my NDA, we cannot.
Okay.
So you know, but
there is a film. It may have Hoypos in it.
It may.
Can we leave this in, or we can cut it out?
Yeah, no, we can leave. I think we can leave this in. I mean,
and we may be in it.
Yeah, and these guys might be in it.
Well, that's why you're here. Yeah, we're kind of at the cusp of next
maybe
couple
we
days.
We might have to ask
if we're on our best behavior.
Yeah. But we'll ask Jeremy if this is still in. If you're hearing this now, then that means that it's okay. That
it's a teaser.
It's public. But
it's just teaser.
But anyways, so our cup is full. Like I'm very thankful for the.
That's awesome.
You know that our cup is full. You know, we've worked very hard for 7-8 years to get to that point. You know, I think this is a feeling that I think that I and the people that I'm lucky enough to call friends and colleagues in the space, we share oftentimes in our private conversations about our fears for this thing that we love and that we're lucky enough to get to document, right? And we hold ourselves responsible for choosing the right stories that we get to tell, you know. And I think that as a community, you know, we hope that everybody holds that same responsibility on themselves, whether they're podcasters or brands looking to publish films or choosing where they're allocating their dollars and what TV shows they're supporting or sponsoring. Because at the end of the day, you know, the access the opportunity discussion that, you know, that is constantly jousting back and forth, whether you're Matt Ranella or the states or whoever, it's a very real conversation. And I think at times people tune into a podcast and you hear it and it's kind of like rolls like water off the back to an extent because you just hear it and see it on Facebook, but it's real. Like we see it all the time. There's loss of opportunities or loss of value. You know, there's battles out west right now with regards to pursuing lions with hounds. There's battles all over the country for opportunity, and those things are diminishing because land is continuing to be bought up, and you know, there's monetization in the land use in and of itself that's different than it ever has been. And I think that as a community of creators, you know, we have to, you know, the world is always evolving. Like, you know, like we may be the same shape, meaning like the same shape of a hunter, but how we are internally and how we portray ourselves is changing and needs to change, you know? And I think that it's there in certain aspects, but I would hope that we don't buckle down, you know, which is my fear. And that's part of the reason why I think the conversation is so relevant, is because as a community, if I had to be my own biggest critic as a as a hard-headed individual and of the hunting community in and of itself, there's times where we have the tendency to buckle down when we need to take a step back and go, let me be introspective about this and determine, am I actually doing something that might be causing this problem, you know? And I think that's, you know, I know that that's what we hope is being perceived when we create content, whether it's for Hoyt or any other organization, is that content is creating long-term value that allows us to continue to do this. And that I hope that whether you're a brand or another influencer, I would push you to think about everything you put out there, and the general audience as well, you know, because you're ultimately the influence that you have, whether it be small or large, is steering the direction of someone's opinion about the thing that we all love and enjoy, you know? And sometimes I think it's just because content, we digest it so much so fast, it rolls like water off all of our back because we're all in it all the time and we all understand it. But we lose sight of the fact that there's still the majority of the population in the world doesn't grasp the same things that we grasp, right? So there's risk involved.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I think it's
a scary time.
That's the biggest challenge, because even when those VHS tapes were coming out and killing, quote, big bucks and stuff on them, the vast majority of hunters were just hunting and killing deer and putting food on the table. And, you know, maybe they killed a buck because they wanted to kill a buck, but they weren't trophy hunting. We are very much in a whitetail deer hunting trophy society at this point.
We are
fully engulfed in it.
We are, but I think that we as a community can still, it's, you know, it's almost like if you don't tune it, you know, and a lot of this I feel like teeters on the, you know, I'm not going to tell anybody how to do anything, but I know we're talking a lot about personal freedoms, but it's like, you know, my mom grew up telling me if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Sure.
You know, and it's like when it comes to the general hunting community, not necessarily brands, because they're not, you know, brands or influencers typically are steering away from, I think, doing things that might necessarily put them in hot water. Not everybody. Some people thrive on that. But I think that the general social crowd, there's a percentage of those folks that get publicity because of the shock value of the reactionary content that they publish, whether it's calling somebody out for shooting a 2-year-old, you know, or doing something like that when that person was obviously excited about it, or they don't understand that person's background or story. Yeah. You know, and I'm not saying that, once again, I don't love to hunt, pursue big bucks, and that people should have the opportunity to do that. But it's like, do that on your own time. Like, do that. You know, you can push that message, say that message, do whatever you're going to do, but don't like beat somebody down because they don't follow your.
Well, here's one big thing that I experienced when I first got into this industry.
I'm sorry, just like to even hear that it's like happening, it's like kind of blowing my mind.
Oh yeah. All over the place.
Because I'm like, yeah, of course, like yeah. Like, why would you belittle anybody for?
See, here's the thing: is that's where it takes, you have to, I think it's like, we can say that sitting at this table all together as a community, the same way if we were sitting around a bar talking about it, easy to do in person, but it's like, nobody is in person anymore. People are engaging with the world through the phone. So there is no emotional context. Like,
the HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Sever.
Well, one of the biggest things that we always talk about is what our arrow setups are. And this year we're shooting the Sever broadheads. I think we're both shooting the new 2-inch titanium broadhead. And so, we're huge proponents of expandables. And I know we've had this argument back and forth with people, but we're right and you're wrong, and you just need to accept it. We just want to have a giant wound that pumps out blood. That's the bottom line.
We build our arrow setups and shoot bows, to maximize penetration, and we shoot broadheads that are going to give us the best blood trails, the most hemorrhage possible. And so part of those setups is we're also shooting the Easton arrows here coming up pretty soon. So we've shot the Victory in the past, and there's all kind of great arrow shafts on the market, but like we're looking for a whole system from broadhead to arrow components to the arrow shaft itself. And, the more we look at some of these Easton shafts and the components that go with them, that setup's going to be really deadly for us.
Yeah, I'm actually using the Easton traditional axis right now in my traditional setups for both my recurve and my longbow. I've got a 100-grain brass insert on those, and then obviously I'm using a fixed blade broadhead on those specific shafts.
Right on.
So, but yeah, our goal is always to be shooting the best broadhead that we think is going to be the most lethal for our setups. We've done plenty of research. We believe in the Sever broadheads, and we hope you would check them out at Sever Broadheads as well. So I think the biggest thing around the whether we're talking about individual content creators or the average guy listening to this who you're producing content you're putting on social media, even if you're just one guy. Like 20 years ago when I got into the space, I remember meeting, I wouldn't say one of the guys that I looked up into the industry, but somebody very well known in the industry, and got to sit down and talk to him, big whitetail guy. And I said, man, it's got to be so cool to just like hunt for a living. And he's like, I'm not a hunter, I'm an entertainer. He's like, I'm just out there entertaining you. He literally like looked dead when we were talking about his hunts, had zero emotion. He was just out there killing deer to entertain you, to make money. I think that we're in a society that there are a lot of influencers in that same mindset. They're entertainers. They're not purely out there enjoying it, which again is probably why I get attracted to somebody like a THP or a Whitetail Adrenaline. I'm not saying.
Do you think even today?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, but in
most of them are still on TV.
Maybe that's
I don't know.
Maybe that's what I'm getting at too.
You know them.
maybe that's what I'm getting at is like that, those people when you're at a trade show or you're somewhere and you meet that person and you can, your general listeners don't get the chance to meet those people. But I know the feeling you're talking about because I've had that feeling before.
It's not a good
meeting
feeling.
Somebody and you're meeting a shell of a person who once loved that.
Absolutely. That's why they started it.
I gotta say, like for me, it hasn't happened a lot. Like the podcast is our best, whatever. We met a lot of people doing this. Man, I can count on this hand probably the number of times that I've been like,
because they haven't been guests.
That guy does it a hunt. Well, sure, and yeah, we're looking for them.
That's why they're out there.
Yeah, but why would somebody? But the thing is like somebody who is in that space and is willing to say that in a private conversation. It's not something that they would want to publicize.
No, they're an actor.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he was describing himself as. He's an actor.
But see that and when you invest into somebody like that, I think that those individuals are less likely to even understand this or be able to still articulate the feeling and the emotion and the story that is why we all love what we do, because it's just a job. It's just a means to an end for them.
Yeah, you would think that would not last very long. Like it wouldn't be relatable.
Even if you take all your content producers on YouTube and stuff out of the way, simply look at, and I don't have it on my phone anymore, thank God, but look at all your TikTok girls that are dressing in Sitka and doing whatever. They're not. Do you think they're doing it because they love it?
No.
Exactly. They're doing it to make money.
I don't know if anybody's is.
They're purely an entertainer.
Thinking that they are, though. Yeah.
Oh, they absolutely are.
Well, I don't know, man. Every conversation? I mean, is it possible even that your conversation was like taken out of context? Like, is it possible that he loved hunting?
But I would say at some point he did,
or even at that point, but was implying that like because of the sponsorship model and like everything that they've gone through, he's
no. It was a complete.
He was just like
he was shooting him in high fences at that point too,
right?
Which is why I came up to him. I saw him shoot a deer with a handgun in Pennsylvania in October when there was no gun season in October, and I was like, that doesn't make sense.
How's that work?
So I asked him. He was like, yeah, I was in a high fence. That's why he told me he was an entertainer. Oh. I 100% believe at some point when he got into it, he loved it. You didn't just say, well, I failed it in Hollywood, I'll become a hunter.
You don't take the leap if you don't love it.
Right.
Yeah.
But the mentality changed to where he fell out of love with hunting, and it became he was an actor. How right. I talked with him behind closed doors versus what everybody else saw was a 180.
But yeah, I mean, yes, but it's like when you at face value, but when you boil it down, it's still there. Like that, the details are there. It's like the
origin was there.
It's written between the lines. It's like you can, if you dig deep enough, you can find it. And I think that's in me talking a lot about this, I think it's based on getting in front of prospective fears in the space, and it's getting in front of those fears to say like, hey, we need to acknowledge this and take an active step as storytellers, whether we're creatives or brands or whoever, and say, hey, is this bring when we boil down into this, if that does come to light and somebody goes, well, let's just say somebody gets a hold of that, and they do dig down and they do find that episode and that publicizes, it's like, is that going to give us the opportunity to speak towards our morals and ethics as a hunting community? Probably not. No. So it's like, well, what are we doing here, folks? It's like, it's like, just like the experience with that guy, the soul is gone. And that's the part that when I talk to either antis or non-hunters, the only conflict they have is when they have those experiences, because oftentimes they see that reactionary content. They haven't had the chance to have the dialogue with somebody or see the content like we're talking about right now, where there's this emotional investment and they feel committed to it, and you could make the argument that, well, they should have taken the time to go look to determine that, but it's not their responsibility. It's our responsibility to make sure that when that stuff is, that whether you're a creator or a brand or whoever, that you're assessing the situation going, are we doing something that is going to potentially bite us in the butt? It's like that's, and that's the kind of thing where, will it come out? Maybe not. But if it does, is it like you're rolling the dice, and I think as an industry, we roll the dice a lot. There's a lot of rolling the dice that goes on, and I don't think it's needed. I think that there's a lot of really good creative groups. There's a lot of really good stories. There's a lot of really good hunters. There's a lot of really good outdoorsmen. There's a lot of really good things out there to be publicizing. But in certain ways, I think we are conditioned to operate in the field that we are operating in versus pushing the boundaries and doing more, content that calls to that story and that nostalgia. And to be clear, there are organizations and groups and teams and brands are doing it more. I just think that it needs to be like, I think that as a community, both as general listeners or general, audience members, as well as creators, we need to continue to be vocal about it. You know? And brands need to continue to be like, oh man, I need to think about this. Who are we? Are we doing this for the dollar, or are we doing this, for the long term? To me, that's where, and you mentioned a few very successful, that's where authenticity comes through, right? Like the brands that are looking for authentic content creators have audiences that are already attached to them because they know that the boys or girls or whoever's talking are authentic, right? That those go in that. I think as a community of content producers and as general hunters, we just have to keep an eye out for the ones who are not authentic, the ones who are quote unquote the entertainers out there. And I think they're amassing more than you think because this space can be lucrative
if you do it the right way. Even as just an individual content creator. I'm not saying that you're going to, make millions over it and be whatever, Mr. Beast of YouTube, but you can surely set yourself up. I'm not saying that they don't have an origin in hunting. Like they didn't at one point love it because you had to start the path somewhere, but that mentality can change very quickly. And I think that to me is where, again, free speech, do what you want on a content. That's where I think the biggest danger in anybody just putting content out there exists, is because those people can reach just as many eyeballs as the authentic people.
And I think that it's okay to have the freedom to put content out there, but it amplifies the responsibility for the people at the top of that chain to be steering that crowd, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be saying, hey, this is the way we're going to do this. This is the way we do this. We hold ourselves accountable to this. But it's like, if you're not extra vocal, if you're not providing extra emphasis,
Mm-hmm.
not just to keep yourself out of hot water, but in an active role to preserve the opportunities that we all know and love, then you're not like, that's the world we live in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's on us to you have to be active. You can't take a passive role and say, well, maybe, I'm not, we'll just kind of let it play out. It's like,
no,
well, that's not,
yeah.
You can't just, we're too small of a group of people doing this, I think,
Mm-hmm.
In comparison to the larger pot.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, it's an interesting thing in the way that again, not to focus on it, there's that fulcrum point where we just turned hard, and we've been heading in that direction ever since. And I think there's been small changes, and there's been impactful films, that have come out. There's been impactful groups that have come out, but it hasn't changed that trajectory yet. But I think it's something that if we intend to see, hunting continue and not be threatened, and frankly not become like the rich man's game, we have to turn it. If we don't turn it, it will be bad. We'll be Europe.
And if we do want it, if you want it to be the rich man's game, then let's just keep on the trajectory of, because it's getting us to where we are, right?
Which is like, what Europe's model is.
Which is like, let's fantasize bigger is better all the time, and that you have to have bigger is better. You have to have the thing to create the bigger, and that's going to continue to shrink your community, and it's going to get more and more difficult, and your experience on public land is going to get more and more crowded and worse, and it's this redundant, it's this revolving circle, versus like, let's take a step back, let's look at our narrative as a community, and let's say, hey, when we are being storytellers, regardless of how big or how small, are we steering our space into the right direction? And I just don't think we ask ourselves that question enough, in the community. It's
hard to take a step back.
That's
the thing. It's easy to say. It's hard for some, the community to actually do it.
I think that the risk is there's so much of going back to the personal opinion things, I wonder if there's the fear of the loss of money prevents people from taking stands when they need to take stands.
Absolutely.
So which is kind of why it's one of those things where it's like, conversations like this are valuable because we're strong as a unified group. That's been very true with the hunting community. It's been very true with all outdoor recreation communities. We're weak when we stand as one, right? So I think that it's very difficult for an individual brand. They have to have a lot of gumption and a lot of back end to come with them where they can weather a storm to come out and go hammer drop, and do, because they might off-put people. But if the whole community comes out and says, hey, we know this is going on, because most of us share the same feeling and opinion, regardless of how much we talk about it. Most of us know and share this feeling. We just don't communicate it that much. So if we're all saying it, if we're all talking about it, if we take those personal conversations that we all have, around the deer camp table after a hunt, and we say, hey, let's bring the world into this and make sure that they know that we don't like X part of our own crowd at times. Let's hold ourselves accountable. you know?
Which is what exactly? What I feel like we're speaking very vaguely about it. Like, is it the fact that big deer are being put on a pedestal?
No, I think it's just the that being the only thing. It seems like that to as a person who digests a lot of hunting content, not just because I enjoy it myself, but also as somebody who is in the creative side of things. I feel like that the industry as a whole everything is still moving the way of the scale of the large whitetail,
glorifying big deer, big antlered deer.
And once again, it's about context. It's not that you can't love to hunt big deer. I love to hunt big deer, but I try my best when I talk to somebody who doesn't understand, or when I'm communicating to a brand about a story that we're working to tell with them, that we need to articulate why this is happening, not just the fact that, oh my gosh, this is the biggest deer I've ever seen on the hoof.
Mm-hmm.
People don't understand. So, and then the general audience, even existing hunters or existing outdoorsmen, I think will look at that, and whether they realize they're doing it or not, glorify the wrong part of the hunt, and it comes off in ripple effects around them or to people that they touch. It's like a butterfly effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it builds like unconscious patterns within people when you don't create good values and good ethics and good morality, and say you can totally chase big whitetails. Totally agree. However, don't just show you shooting a big whitetail.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you so excited about that big deer? What was the struggle like? What happened? What occurred? And if it was just you walked out there and you sat in a tree for the first time of your, you only had one opportunity to hunt, and a world-class deer walked by, then
that's the story.
Be honest with it.
Yeah. And clearly don't, belittle people that aren't shooting.
Exactly. And I think the belittling is one of the products of where we are, and maybe to kind of try to, I guess
there's a self-guilt there too, man. Like in certain cases I've seen like the hunter belittling, which is just stupid. But how many of us have seen it where the first thing is like not the biggest or whatever? It's an excuse out of the gate. It's basically saying, hey, I didn't really want to shoot this, but or this is why I shot. Like, it's a justification.
I guess I'm just so tired.
You know what I mean?
I'm so tired of the divisiveness within our own community, right? And I'm looking for parts of these conversations and the opinions I hold, which are I'm an evolving person myself, so I'm constantly growing, and my opinions are changing and evolving. But it's like I'm seeing what I feel like you're seeing. I think you might not have seen as much of it, but I think other people see it as well. I feel like the divisiveness within the hunting community is there, whether it's like
there's definitely divisiveness. I see that.
I'm so tired of that, because that was not what I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
That was not why I fell in love with hunting. And I think that the only conclusion that I can come to is that divisiveness is being perpetuated from the top down to sell product.
I mean, they are the manufacturers are the master puppet strings of the entire hunting community.
And they're using
when you say divisiveness, like a division.
Yeah. Like for example, people
crossbows.
I
corn piles.
I don't hunt with
the
right?
premise of our podcast.
Well, no.
Yeah.
So
you would say divisiveness between groups?
Well, yes, but I think that there's ethics and morality discussions there, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would be more along the lines of like
divisiveness is divisiveness. I mean,
yes, but I think
I'm with you. There's nuance. I get it.
Yeah, exactly. There's nuance there. I think everybody knows kind of what the concept. It's like, oh, I don't hunt with this person because they're not a saddle hunter. I don't hunt with this person because they hunt. I don't share camp.
Okay,
with
so
this
let's
person
say
because of this. I don't care.
let's say trophy hunter versus meat hunter. You say it would be divisiveness.
I think that there are times it can be divisive, but I think I think that unfortunately the trophy guys, which at least I'm saying there are people out there that I'm sure are just in it just for the antlers and they don't eat the deer at all. But most of the guys that I know that are interested in big antlers are still, they love great backstrap, you know, but maybe that's not the story that they're telling, you know?
Yeah, I'm cooking something tonight.
Yeah. So I think that it's, to me, I'm so tired of that within the community, and it's such a turnoff for me as a hunter.
Seeing divisiveness is what you're talking about.
Just being, you know, seeing it, but also feeling like it's like in my own house, right?
You're right, because like when we grew up, and it's so, because you know, even in the 90s, like archery was a thing. Like the archery guys and the gun guys didn't clash, at least in my group, right?
Like yeah, they did. Yeah, they did for sure.
Not in my group.
In the general public, yeah, because like
I don't think they did.
They always have.
That's later.
I think it came later.
That's a step later.
I think that it was in the beginning. It was, everything was just a means to go hunting as a community. And somewhere along the lines it went, oh, this is an opportunity. Like, and once again, I predominantly bow hunt. I will shoot a deer with a rifle. I've shot a handful with a rifle the last few years. I love going to a deer camp. Carrying a gun is fun, but I predominantly 90% of my season I'm hunting with a bow. I think that bow hunting helps big whitetails survive.
For sure. Absolutely.
So there's a vest,
as opposed to what?
As just gun hunting.
Like there's a vested interest in bow hunting.
Because bow hunters kill
They do.
deer. They don't help them survive.
They do, but also the process of it is more challenging.
Definitely.
And therefore you have a higher odds chance that
deer
then
a
will
gun
survive.
hunter.
I also think that bow hunters are more selective.
Generally speaking,
I think
probably. Yeah.
probably fair. I mean, but I think that the point being is that there has to be a reason for why everybody wants to point a finger in the community and be like, oh man, this is, you know, let's do this, or we should do this. You know, I feel like it's very common. You listen to a ton of podcasts or, you know, whatever, and people want to discuss the problem. But it's like, where did the divisiveness come from? And if so, how do we address it? It's like, well, we have to backtrack, right? So,
well, here, I'll tell you where it came from. It came from, at this point anyways, or it seems where most of it is lying, is like we are all striving for a limited resource.
Yeah, but I don't even.
And there's competition for it.
But deer overall, bucks overall are not a limited resource necessarily.
Exactly, I agree.
I mean,
certain classes of them are.
There you go.
But that's exactly the same argument that I'm making, is that we're perpetuating that.
You're back in big antlers.
It's okay to value. It's okay to value big antlers. It's okay to value the hunt. It's okay for the whole process. It can't be only that. And there's the shock value that comes with big antlers it's grandiose. It sells stuff.
Sure.
Right. So
it's the sex sales of hunting.
Exactly. Is a big buck is you know, even
right.
You know,
because everybody wants to shoot a big buck. That's why
it's the act of shooting that big buck. It's the, you know, it's that's what it is. So that's the part that's so frustrating, is you're to achieve that goal, you inherently have to perpetuate this "you're on my team or you're not on my team" environment, which creates divisiveness. Wait,
how so?
Meaning, like you wear this or you don't wear that. You do this or you don't do that. You hunt public land or you don't have to, but it's not human nature. People want to be on teams. If you
want to be part of an So that's why you've got your Sitka guys, you got your QU guys, you got your
but you're talking
guys,
about hunting big bucks.
Guys.
And I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm just like trying to understand. So like, I like hunting big mature deer. That's what I choose to do. I don't look down on anybody that doesn't choose to do that.
Because I think you're an introspective individual.
You do a little. Like, I mean, think of the number of big 3-year-olds that have been killed by your neighbors. But that doesn't sit well with you.
Well, it bums me out because I'm trying to get them to the next age class.
Team.
Yeah, I'm not saying that you have to. I'm not.
Well, sure, yeah, no, I would love for them to also share that opinion.
I mean, that's the only way that they get.
But I'm not looking
class.
down on them necessarily. I mean, I don't understand.
You're not. I think it's just more of the division. It's like they're happy shooting that. You would rather them not shoot that.
Sure.
I think that's your division.
Am I doing something wrong there?
Well, I think what it means is the point is it's like there was a window of time where everyone was team deer hunter. Right? That was what we grew up with. That's what we were all stoked about.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the line, it became, I'm team Big Rack, I'm team Meat Hunter, I'm team Sitka, I'm team First Light, I'm team
Very much.
this, I'm team that. And it's like, holy
when the hell did
smokes,
that
dude.
happen?
It's and
I'm just trying to it had to have been that early 2000s period.
And it's like, as a storyteller in the space, it drives me crazy because
there's a lot more to it now. There's a lot more, a lot of variables, I think, is why. Like, there's just like, because of technology, we're occupying way more of the space. Like, back then, there was like I'm sure there was problems, but generally you could say there was no problems because it was like people just kind of hunted wherever they wanted. There was more than enough deer.
Arose because people wanted bigger deer. They wanted big antler deer.
In the scope of cell cameras, yeah, but social media evolved outside of the deer.
Sure,
community,
So I'm saying mainly technology, like within the industry,
and it did. So like we're at a point now, as opposed to then, where it's like we all have cameras. Everybody has pictures of all these deer. We have some pretty serious weapons, including compound bows and crossbows and rifles and stuff, to be able to target them, and all these other tools, box blinds, and like use of baiting and stuff, mapping software.
Yeah.
So I would say the competition is highly increased for a limited resource, and I think that's what's caused people to be like, "Why are you doing it that way?"
But the point,
because I want it's impacting me being able to achieve my goal this way.
The point you keep coming back to is the limited resource part, and that's the thing that I'm trying to call out. Is it's like deer themselves are not a limited resource. The limited
they are technically.
Well, yes. So
they are a finite
They're
resource.
a finite resource. But I mean, like, I think that the opportunity to hunt exists. I do think that the opportunity at a large deer, whatever, we'll just generally say Pope and Young or better, regardless of where you live. Just
pretty available.
It could be there. I think that if you put in the effort, they can be there.
Yep.
And the bigger you go, in just by the law of statistics, there's less and less of them to pay. That
absolutely.
It's about like, what as a community are we purveying when we push content? Like, are we pushing content that is like showcasing why we love what we do and not just a small part of it? So it's
that I definitely agree
I know
with.
that's what you agree with. I just think that I think that the limited resource part is part of the argument that I think that I'm trying to make, and that I would hope people are more aware of. Is it's like, yes, antlers are a limited resource, but that shouldn't be the value in your entire experience, because it may be what you or myself are chasing, but you love so much more about it, even though you're chasing like you know what I'm saying?
Obviously, yeah.
So like, because that was all you've built that.
Well, I would even
passion.
say, like, if we're gonna like use me as the case study, I guess I
we didn't mean to put you on the hot seat.
No, it's okay. It's a good discussion. Like, I value antlers. I think they're cool. It's the trophy element of that animal. It's the indication of
it's the pinnacle. That's its ranking. That's
what it carries. That's the trophy that it produced. Like, it's the thing that's unique about it, that is visual, that we can put our hands on, that we can score. It's what it is.
It's a progression of the challenge, the same way,
It is, though, but there is no like I've never had like the Andre DeQuisto mindset where it's like I have to get a higher inch every time. I just don't feel that way. It's okay. Like, I just realized that, like, for me, it's more interesting, and I've learned from Winky's a great example. A lot of people have realized, like, hey, that's like a fool's game. Like, you're going to run out of inches, so you're better off to embrace the process. But still, I want to shoot a certain age class and a certain antler class that comes along with that in a certain way, because of the challenge that it presents and because of the process that it forces me to like have to live up to.
Yeah, but I think we've clarified, though, that it's like, in this conversation, you are doing your due diligence in that role by conveying in long form format the multitudes of ways you are passionate about getting to that end goal, right? So the issue comes with not clarifying that and walking into a room and being like, "Woo, woo.
Well, yeah,
You know,
but
and then
like
leaving.
you can't.
We get that from people just who don't listen to our whole podcast and catch whatever clips or whatever, and they're like, these guys just want to kill big deer and buy all the ground up and choke everybody out.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think our there is no format. Like, it's just us talking about it. I think it shows through the interest, the interest. But I can't expect everybody that wants to shoot big bucks to have the platform to do it.
Yeah, but
you know what I mean?
But it's like
I can ask them to live to a standard on their own social media. Absolutely, I think that's what you're saying.
To the defense of you guys, is you challenge yourself in conversations. What appeals to me.
Well, clearly, we're doing it right now. Yeah.
What appeals to me about your podcast is you don't just have people on that are directly aligned with the exact goal that you talk about.
Right.
There's other values, there's other missions, there's controversial.
Well, what fun would that be?
Well, but there's a lot of that content out there.
Oh yeah, that's a lot of it.
So right back to the
circle jerking. That's what you call that.
Right back to the same point though, is like going back to it is it's like somehow along that process of going from hunting being I'm team hunting to now we ended up in this world that I think it's changing. I just think it's changing slowly, and my fear is it's not going to change fast enough to the point to where it's going to disparage a portion of our hunting community.
Well,
if that makes sense.
Here would be an alternative perspective to look at it. Is I don't have any animosity towards other groups. I wouldn't say in fact, I think it's pretty cool. It's one of the cool things about hunting that people don't care about antlers and they just hunt for meat or to go and have their camp experience, or whatever reason that you hunt. I think it's really cool. That's one of the things. In the same breath, I do think that it's the state's responsibility to manage the resource for all of its stakeholders. And so I'm personally okay with the fact that there's a lot of gun hunters out there. And I don't personally have a ton of interest in it, but it's great. There's a resource out there for us to all go and enjoy. So I don't really direct any, and that's why I would never look down on somebody for doing that, or I may not understand it. Certainly there's been people that every year for 40 years shoot a basic racked buck with their gun or whatever. And I'm me personally, I'm I would expect to see some evolution, some growth, in some direction, and maybe I'm just not seeing it.
I think but I mean, that's where I'm saying it's okay. I think, it's kind of a double-edged sword in the sense that it's okay for you to have, maybe that's going back to the divisiveness is you're not imparting your negative feelings on people potentially based on well, maybe you are. I don't know.
I don't think I am.
Not getting,
some people certainly do.
Yeah, but I think it's, I don't know, where would I go? How would I kind of explain this? Is
I'm talking about embracing not divisiveness, but the fact that we're diverse
as a community. And I think that's a value that you hold. I don't think that that's the norm. I don't feel like that.
Most people are just F those guys.
It would be you're you're kind of leading to you're in my point of me saying it's you're different.
Yeah. Well, I'm embracing what you're saying.
About. Yeah. There's justification for why you're different.
Yeah. I think that I think it's great. So maybe I'll reiterate the point. I think it's great that there's crossbow hunters. It's great. It's cool. If that's what you like to do and you're enjoying that aspect of it, then awesome. Do I feel a way about how that should be regulated and maybe its season should be treated differently than a compound bows? I definitely do.
I agree that it's different.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean I hate guys that hunt with crossbow. That can be taken out of context. But it doesn't mean that at all. You know what I mean? I'm glad that it's there. I think it's cool that people embrace all certain sort of technologies. We, I think, hold the state accountable in almost every regard where it's there's going to be people who create certain kinds of content. It should be done with thoughtfully, totally on the same page with you there. And there's going to be people that hunt in all certain kinds of ways for different reasons.
For sure.
And I think that's awesome. And it's not I'm blaming them. We all need to work together and help them understand. The state needs to manage the resource for all of us.
But let's play out the the worst case scenario hypothetically, and then assume,
For who?
and then assume, well, for us as a hunting community, right?
Okay.
So let's
All the deer
worst,
die.
worst case. No, well, I mean, yeah. Okay, so maybe
Yeah.
that's max.
That's
worst
it.
case. Yeah.
That's it. Well, dude, that's a reality. Like you look at the CWD conversation and like,
So
sorry, go
well,
ahead.
well, no. So within the bounds of this conversation,
Okay.
let's assume that something occurs or a wide enough discussion occurs where there's. If I'm not mistaken, and in the please correct me if I'm wrong. I believe most states don't have the right to hunt and fish as a constitutional
Correct.
right within their
The minority of them do.
the minority. So it as a country that is widely governed from a state by state basis, if the individuals within a state decided to elect, much like the conversation that goes on with abortion laws right now, if they wanted to say, hey, totally get it, but not here. Worst, disaster scenario for us. And it's like, you can point your fingers at the state, but we're a democracy. So it's not about that. It's not about the states for opportunity. It is about the state's opportunity to create, it is about the state's position to create opportunity that is a good experience for those people, that helps maintain the resource, maintain the landscape, align with conservation and preservation values. However, it is our responsibility, both as a hunting community and as creators and brands within the space, to go, when that happens, there's only one place to point the finger. It's at us, because we have to look at what happened?
Yeah, why did they say no?
Why did they say no? What happened? Where did it come from? Because it's not coming from, the guy who's not on social media. He's not the cause of it. What's happening is something occurred from the top down that put us in a position of a detrimental reality. And I think that discussion, where it's like, there's lots of conversations that are ongoing within whether it's from a BHA perspective or with the blood origins community or whoever, that are like, hey, we need to focus on conservation, preservation. Let's make sure we get the right to hunt and fish as a constitutional right in state, within our states. And let's also make sure that we're fighting for this actively. The reason that that's even a thing is because there's a significant push to take it away, to diminish the visibility of it, to take it away. There's people who have a vested interest because they genuinely do not believe, whether it's because they just don't believe in the activity or they've never been educated by somebody who has the emotional construct to give them a real conversation and actually build on that rapport. Most of the people that I know who were non-hunters or who were anti-hunters that I have the opportunity to talk with usually leave the conversation not as anti-hunters, but as it may not be for me. That's totally
I'm just
fine.
a non-hunter.
I'm just a non-hunter, because they just don't understand. But it's that needs to be our community's conversation, and as long and kind of rounding it out is when we create a divisive culture from the top down. When we create a divisive culture from the top down, it creates it within our own community, and it removes that unification that we should have to better align and to approach those things, and to be able to point within and go, that's ethically questionable, or that's morally questionable. Well, that's hard to do when you're part of a 3-man group or whatever. It's a lot easier to do when we're all moving as a unit. It's there's tons of analogies. Or it's like a football team that doesn't run the same play every on offense. It's we're all running different directions right now. Some people are running draw. Some people are running, this play. Some people are running that. Some people are running quarterback sneak. It's you're going to lose the game real fast.
Yeah, you're disjointed. Yeah, what most people fail to realize is that the reason that most states haven't brought up the issues of do we even need hunters is that we are funding other outdoor recreation in the case of public lands via our license fees, and most of those non-consumptive users aren't paying anything.
Agreed. That's and you're talking about Pittman Robertson dollars, and for anybody who's listening isn't aware that everything that goes from your licenses and goods purchases goes into a box that the states can then access to do their activities or chores with effectively. But the non-hunting community oftentimes is referred to as the backpack community. They're not seeing goods taxed at that rate because
Correct.
they have less. And once again, going back to education, they might not have been they are not being educated on that, and there's organizations in their space that are lobbying against those backpack taxes, even though they're using the landscape at the same or greater rate than we as hunters and anglers are.
Yep.
So that being said, it's more important now than ever that we're focusing on our messaging and our storytelling as a community and showing the right thing, I think, because of the fact that that's the battle we're fighting, And I think that if we approach things from an emotional and a humble perspective and we justify what we love, I think that it's going to make it easier for those individuals to say, oh, well, I do love mountain biking. I understand why you love what you love and you're paying your fair share. I'm okay with paying like 10% and expressing to maybe the brands in that space that if their mountain bike goes from $800 to $849.99 and $50 of that goes to land conservation, that they're still going to buy the product, or the brand is not going to have to eat it, or maybe we do hold the brands accountable and we go, hey, non-hunting brand, like your users, if the opportunity for them to do these recreational activities goes away, you lose your money anyways. So it's like, think about the long term, but whatever that reason is the divisive culture, I think, needs to go away. And the whole first part of this conversation was based around rooting out where that came from and then kind of looking at ourselves and going, how do we get here? And how do we both say it's okay for people to want to do what they want to do based on their individual freedoms? However, let's make sure our messaging and our storytelling is targeted at the real reason why we all love what we do.
Agree?
So.
Yeah. I would agree, generally.
Yeah, it's a wild space, man. I mean, it's even when we're talking about the 90s, it's 30 years ago, and it's hard to believe the evolution that's happened. Really, it seems like in the last 20 or 25. But we're definitely, because of the visibility of the content. We use the term in this whole conversation of content as loose. Like we're not just talking about you putting out a film. We're talking about Jared posting a social media picture, me whatever. I think the mass distribution and frequency of content in today's society has escalated this perceived issue. Whereas 25 years ago, it was very subdued, right? Even the general public for hunting was very, unimpacted by it. Now, everybody and anybody is impacted by this on every second of the day. Like it just keeps coming. So that frequency of it going out there from as many people that are putting it out there, it's becoming an issue. It's like, even on my marketing team, like the one thing I always tell everybody is like, hey, you may not think about like an organic social media post as being a big piece of the entire advertising plan we're doing, but it's the most visible.
Exactly.
Right? As soon as you put it out there, it's out there. Everybody sees it. There's your dirty laundry out. So it's that same kind of mindset here. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to kind of reflect back to what it was before that trajectory change in the whitetail space, or in the whitetail hunting space at least. And I don't know, kind of gives you chills to feel a little dirty about it.
I just think we're so in it, like I said, nobody's perfect. We've all had moments in life. Like I've had realizations, like in parts of my life where I was like, I don't really know if I don't like this, or I don't like how this came out, or I don't like that this played out this way, or, question my own ethics and morality. And I think that I hope that we're not so focused on the dollar as a community that we are losing contact with the reason that we're actually interested in what we're doing, and then it's, we oftentimes are just pointing fingers as aggressively as we can because nobody wants to take blame, and it's like, well, if my messaging is off, if we create a film, if a brand hires us to do a project and we create a film and it's not what they wanted, and I got the story wrong, that I built for them, then it's on me.
Right.
You know, like if they clearly told me, you know, which, you know,
yeah,
then it's on me,
mm-hmm.
you know? So it's, that's the way that I look at our industry is like, to me, there's a clear ethical and moral position that I feel like we all share within our hearts and our core feelings about the activity that we do. But oftentimes we just aren't choosing to really vocalize that.
I think a lot of it is motivated by value of the animal. I don't think a lot of people value the animal as much as, I'll just say me, I guess. Like I would say, I think I value the animal a lot more than a lot of people that I know. And it just comes down to experience. It's built over time, like via relationship with the experience with the animal. And that's okay. Like that's not like wrong. It's just
But whether you value the animal or whether you value the experience is based on what your ability is to put into that opportunity, right? That's what I would think about it. It's like you take a noticeable act, you shift your entire life because of that passion for that. Some guys might be passionate about the experience of hunting and then harvesting that animal. You know, they may not necessarily, the experience may hold more weight for them than the type of animal that it is. You know, so like for you, you're focused on the animal that it's like it's the trade of percentage, but the effort is still there. The emotional investment is still there.
Sure.
You know, and I think that it's for other people as well. It's just different. Neither of them are wrong, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Quest Hunt Co.
Man, it seems like as technology and social media and stuff just gets incorporated into our daily lives in the deer season more and more, it's like we're always looking for ways to just dial it back, spend more quality time with deer hunters, and really make deer hunting and deer camps great again.
Yeah, and I mean, we've all been part of that annual buck pull, whether it's at your camp or the local fire department, and we're trying to bring that feeling back with Quest Hunt Co. to be able to compete against other people in your state, but also be part of a national competition.
You can sign up in as many states as you want to enter deer that at the end are going to get scored, and you have an opportunity to win some big prizes. And there's an in-person banquet in February that Jeremy and I are going to be at where those prizes are going to get held out. I think we're going to do some sort of whatever, live podcast or speaking. We'll figure that out. But just looking forward to spending time with people who sign up for the tournament.
Yeah, so you can go to Quest Hunt Co. and sign up. Use the code HUNTR15 at checkout. They'll save you a little bit of money, and then hopefully we'll be able to see you in Missouri in February of 25 at the annual convention.
To make this season a quest.
A lot to think about, for sure.
It's an introspective conversation. I mean, for it to turn into a therapy session at all, but
no. I mean,
I think it's good.
I think it's a good conversation to have. I mean, I think a lot of people, you know, we've talked about like the deer camp thing, and you know, well, we've said it, you know, make deer hunting great again numerous times, and I think it's a big thing. I mean, the things I don't like, that personal opinion, right, is I hate the desensitivity to big bucks. The allure of big bucks, even myself to a point, it's inevitable that like you lose some of the flair that it used to have just because you see them everywhere, whether that's cameras or social media or the combination of them or whatever. I think it doesn't mean that I don't enjoy or get excited or respect an animal like that any less. But I'm definitely desensitized to when I see one and I'm like, yeah, great deer.
I think you get past it, you know, like on a personal level. Like we can, by these conversations and stuff, probably have influence over how that's portrayed, like industry wise. But like for us, I think you can kind of get over it. Like, yeah, we all know what 230-inch deer look like. Like we've all seen them in pictures and in videos and stuff. And like, cat's out of the bag. Like you can't unsee them. So that's that. I think you can make a cognitive decision though to be like, okay, they're out there, and like I am still going to strive to shoot a big buck or something, but you can't, like, you have to find a place where you're like, you know, here's what I have in front of me, and I'm going to work hard to like improve my opportunity. But
well,
like,
yeah,
that's where I feel pretty healthy about it. It's like I may not kill a 200-inch deer someday, and like, okay. Like
Yeah.
I'm still going to love the process and everything that we do in the meantime.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be happy with deer that I shoot that are lesser than that.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's like I don't personally like if I shoot a big buck, like last year in Illinois, like that animal was amazing.
Yeah.
It's just everything about it. The to your point, the whole experience and situation of the hunt.
Yeah.
How we
Well, that's
shared
a great
it, like,
example
all
of
that
it because
thing.
it's not a super high scoring deer.
Not at all.
And it was an awesome experience
It's
because
amazing.
of everything from,
Yep.
I mean, how far do you take it back? You know what I mean? As far as like our relationship to buying a farm together, to the work that we did on it that year, to the travel, like and being there to do it together was what made that awesome.
Right. And I think so that all in turn, it's like, and it's not a competition thing to be like, well, okay, I killed a big buck. Like if I had it out there, like everybody should be like, man, that's a big buck type of, competition or comparison. But in the same breath, it's like it used to be, it just was a different feeling. Like whether we were growing up in PA and spotlighting on a summer night and you hit, you saw a 2 or 3 year old 8-point and you're like, oh my God, like look at the size of it. Like it just hit differently when you saw that deer coming through a cornfield when you're a bow hunting. Everything about it just hit differently to now.
It's cameras. For the most part, it is social media. It's cameras.
I don't think
for us, it's cameras because we see them all the time. We saw a giant buck this morning. I just sent you a bunch of pictures of them. It will be less,
which is amazing.
It's awesome, and we're having that enjoyment now. It will dilute it when I see that animal in person, inevitably.
Yeah, but I think that the difference is you guys have enough value invested in other aspects.
Oh,
of that
absolutely.
experience to still create that. Like I don't think you guys are the case study that we're talking about, rather than rather.
That's good.
Like,
That's good to hear.
I don't. Well, I don't think you guys. I think we're talking about like I think we're talking about more on the general hunting public as well as certain brands and organizations in the industry that might not be
people though too. We've had a guy walk into this building with a stringer full of 10, 130 to 140 class bucks that he killed at multiple outfitters or leases throughout the year, and it was just like, yep, here it is. And it's like, I don't want to put words in it. There's no way he could have appreciated like that whole thing.
Sure.
Like it literally was just punching tags to create a show.
And I'm not saying that. Once again, I'm not saying that people can't go out and have that experience if that's what they choose to have. I just don't think that that's the experience we should be pushing.
Agree.
From the top down.
Definitely.
Agree.
And I don't think that you guys are saying that. And I know that that's not what, if I were to speak, and I don't want to speak for all of the guys on our team or the people that we work with have their own voices, but if I were to speak frank, I don't think that they would have that same. They would align with this conversation with what we're having, and I think that I just think there needs to be some level of an accountability that we hold ourselves to, where oftentimes in our industry, we want to try to point fingers everywhere else except for ourselves. I just don't.
Oh yeah, I mean it's human nature. Yeah, of course.
It's so easy to blame people outside of our own group, and it's like, it's if there's one thing that I learned from football, it's that when you're having a head coach is kind of nice from the perspective of he doesn't always tell you what you want to hear, but he's still talking to the same team. Like he's still talking to everybody in the same room. Even if you and your offensive coordinator are aligned, a head coach might see something and be like, look guys, I love you. We both we're all here for the same reason, but the reality is you did this. You shouldn't have done that. And it's like, I'm not telling you that because I hate you. I'm telling you that because I love you.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't have these feelings because I hate people who chase big bucks, because I chase big bucks. I don't have these feelings because I hate crossbow hunters or I hate other creators or I hate people who have a TV show. I have these feelings because I'm worried about the messaging that at times comes from the industry that we're in, and that we don't hold ourselves accountable by pointing the fingers back at ourselves and thinking about the messaging that we're putting out there, both to our existing audience and to our non participant audience, and say like, sometimes it's good to get off your high horse and say like, I can't just ride this freedom battle forever, and say like, and it's hard, it's a hard conversation to have, and I get it. I have a American flag on the dash of my truck. Like I'm proud to, you know, do this and have my freedoms and have those conversations. And I support everybody doing what they want to do and carrying, you know, living their lives, whatever they want to do. But, you know, I also think that we should hold each other accountable. And I do my best to hold myself accountable. You know, when I, you know, let my own team down or let a brand down or do something that I shouldn't have done. And I hope that I think that as a hunting community, we just need more of that, you know? And it's our responsibility as storytellers. I think it's, you know, and the brand, whether it be brands or individual contract storytellers or podcasters or YouTubers, those messages don't come off without honesty and transparency and telling a justifiable story and us first admitting that there's a problem and saying like, hey, I do think this is changing. And I think that there's a lot of media that is being created that is I'm not saying that there's not, but I do think that we need to get on that horse faster.
I mean, this might be kind of our wrap up, but obviously you mentioned, you know, whatever, long form video, podcast, you know, YouTube clips, TikToks, whatever, any form of content. If you look at the audience side from a hunting standpoint, and let's just stick with deer because that's what we talk about here. What do you think that audience demographic looks like in terms of people who understand what we're talking about, understand the process, and potentially the pursuit of, let's say, big bucks per se, and then put basically everybody else into like the just, you know, pursuit of hunting. So 2 different groups, pursuit of big bucks and pursuit of hunting in 2 different groups. Cause that's what it seems to be, at least in our comments a lot, the way that I interpret it. Do you think that's evenly split? Is it leaned heavy one way or the other?
I think that that's a hard question to ask. So to reiterate,
that's why I asked it.
To make sure I
don't know if we know.
To make sure I understand, it's breaking like percent. We're gonna just drop some percent.
Just the deer hunting, whitetail guys.
Guys who pursue just big bucks versus people who just pursue
like hunting
in general.
What do you mean hunt to hunt? Like there's.
Yeah, they're just out there to hunt. They want to kill a deer.
I almost feel like
to kill a deer.
I almost feel like that there's. I think that it's. I would label it. I think that it's a low. I think there's a low percentage of people that are just out there to kill a deer. I think that they will shoot something, whatever comes across their plate. I think what they're out there for is something that carries a big rack on its head.
Interesting.
So I'm not saying that they're out there. I'm not saying that that there's that they're out there just to hunt, or that they're out there just to that they're out there just to chase a big buck. But I think that it's almost like it's so ingrained that it's subconscious. It's like the guys who are conscious about it know.
There you go.
That they're like that's what they're doing, and they're okay with that, and they can justify it, and maybe they're invested in it, or hopefully they're not a shell like that guy we talked about.
Sure.
But then everybody else, that's all they're digesting. That's all they're being thrown. That's all the media that's being purveyed in a lot of the short form content or the flashy in your face. It's racks on this, it's rack on that. It's this on this scent spray bottle. It's this, it's that. That's all there is. So even if they are going out there just to shoot anything, you're opening yourself up for that position of like the messaging that they're receiving is only messaging surrounding big deer. And then when they do harvest something, the hope is that they're content with what they harvest, because maybe they're not even educated enough to get the opportunity at a big deer. But then when they do shoot something, you don't want them to walk up and feel like it's less of value because of the fact that
you don't want them to start the conversation with, it's not my biggest, but
exactly. I hate that.
Well, that is interesting. Like I always wonder, or it makes you wonder why that is. If it's an internal thing or if it's external.
It's external.
It's both. It's definitely both.
It's because of the once again, holding myself and other creators in the industry accountable, whether you're a brand as a creator or just a creator yourself. The world that has led us to this point has been a world that has gratified the bar for success is an antler, is antler size. It's not experience value. It's not Like, when did you go and like, when was the last time you went to Bass Pro Shops and picked up a scent bottle that had a father and a son walking as the silhouetted cover on the front of it?
It's got a big buck
never.
on it.
It's got a big buck on it. But you know why you fell in love with it?
Yeah, what bag of seed do you pick? The one with the big buck on it.
Exactly. You know, like, the same. I understand the allure. I just don't think that it's the healthiest thing for our industry. I think that it needs context. And I think that because of the nature of the way our world is with content and how fast we digest stuff, we have to take a much more active role as a community to conveying that context, because people have less of an attention span. There's less to publicize, and there's no regulatory body that's going to come down from up top and go like lightning bolt. That's not going to happen. So it's on us. It's on creators.
It's a self-regulation.
It's on creators to say, I'm not going to take that project, or I am going to take that project, or I am going to tell that story. Or if you do have to tell a story, to be like, hey man, let's think about telling this. Let's ask these interview questions. Let's talk about this, or it's on brands to decide, is this the person I want to sponsor? Is this the way I want? Is this the medium that I think is the best for our longevity as a community? And are we having those conversations, or are we all in this fire pit of social media as a collective unit, and we want to point fingers at every other group that's different from us, or at every other thing that's not ourselves, and say, the problem is you, and you just don't understand what I do, because that's where we're at a lot of the time.
Yeah, the one of the reasons I asked about the kind of big bucks, and you can classify those guys as trophy hunters. I mean, that's pretty much, even though there's more to the experience and process that they're going for, that is part of it, is that a lot of even the most recent stuff around that, and it's trying to put it in context to the general voting public, is like basically less than 15% of hunters are trophy hunters. The other 85% are hunters, period. I think that's a complete bullshit lie.
Well, but see, I think
Can you put something to that? Like, they're hunting for a reason. So if it's not to shoot a big buck, what is it?
It would be sustenance.
Meat.
So, but
is it?
Yeah.
Taking case the guy who shoots the same 1-year-old every year for 40 years, but never shoots a doe.
I think that's where
that's not a sustenance defense.
I think that we need more data points in that
I agree.
discussion to
Absolutely.
justify that conversation. I don't think that you can bucket that into just two groups. It's too nuanced, and I think that the discussion is not about what you choose to hunt. It's about how you're influenced to experience the hunt. The influences that have been put on you in that when you do harvest something, what are you valuing about that, and what are your internal emotions?
Yeah.
And saying that, like, if we are saying that, hey, let's just let everything ride, but we know that these emotions exist within a large percentage of our hunting audience. So
which emotion are you talking about?
Just any sort of negative feeling about the result of their hunt.
Okay.
So that is not a recipe for maintaining and preserving hunting opportunity for the future.
No way.
Right? So it's like, if we do, let's just lean into, like,
on the other side, not to interrupt, but on the other side, and traditionally I wouldn't put myself, I don't consider myself a trophy hunter either. Coincidentally.
I don't, but see, I don't consider myself a trophy hunter, but I'm gonna pursue big deer.
Agree. So that group is also interesting, because like, I'm not going to shoot the first buck I see for meat, but I also don't consider myself a trophy hunter.
Well, yeah, it's like I have.
Why not?
I think probably more of the stereotype of what a trophy hunter is.
Yeah, it's a negative connotation.
It's the dentist who killed the lion who got crucified.
That's what you think of.
I think I would classify myself as, I'm a hunter who is I hold standards for myself based on how hard I want to work. If I,
yeah, you have a goal
and
for the kind of animal you want to shoot,
and what the reward is. But it's not. I'm not going to say I wouldn't be excited if I shot a booner, but if I'm hunting in Illinois and I'm sitting there in my stand and a 4-year-old comes by, he's probably getting shot.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not choosy.
That's where you're at.
But so here's an interesting scenario. Like, I think it's really healthy, actually, not just okay, for people to have goals for themselves inside of their activity.
Yes.
So if your goal is to shoot a 4-year-old buck, regardless of where or with what weapon or whatever, and a 3-year-old runs in and you shoot it, and you walk up to it, see, and a lot of people will probably disagree on this. I think it's okay to be disappointed in some capacity. Not that that animal shouldn't be appreciated and that it shouldn't still be consumed and all of that, but simply based on the fact that you didn't achieve your goal, I think it's okay if you're like bummed out by that.
I think for the small I think for a small percentage of the hunt, I think for a small percentage of the hunting community that takes it to that level, I think that I can understand that concept.
Or anything. My goal is to shoot a 2-year-old, and I shot a 4-corn.
For sure, but it's like I just don't. I think it's different. That experience is different than somebody then. I feel like the largest portion of the community is hunting to hunt, but they're focused on the allure of shooting something really big when either they don't have the knowledge or the skill set or even the environment to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they do shoot something, they don't even have they're not thinking about my goal is this year class or this rack size, or this percentage. They just walk up and go, man, that's a bummer. Or the people who don't even think that, they're so stoked that they share a 1.5-year-old 8-point on Facebook, are like constantly tug of war between this mix of congrats and bullish comments saying, hey, you made this mistake. You made a mistake.
There's definitely that. There's definitely like an overriding context that like you should be hunting big bucks that I think is probably unhealthy.
Well, I mean,
I agree with that.
My fear there, going back to the like whether stats are wrong or right, is that I think the three of us understand why we chase a particular class of animals and the process that goes into it. In a snap of a finger, a animal rights group or anti-hunting group could easily say, you guys are all trophy hunters, and the non-hunter would go right with them on that. They'd be like, yeah, clearly. I mean, if those guys are just trying to kill big bucks, like they're trophy hunters that fast. That's why I think from a content side, we have to be so careful.
Exactly.
Because even though like I spend thousands of dollars on creating better habitat, and hell, half the time I'd rather just watch the deer than kill the deer, whatever it is, the reality is my mindset of pursuing a particular class of animal can easily be flipped on a script by the non-hunting community and anti-hunting community as a trophy hunter.
Sure.
If there is, and I do believe that there are, a large progression of us that went from just being hunters in the 90s to being that mindset, that's what puts us at risk.
I think it's just context oriented. It's
exactly context oriented.
Context oriented. It's the ability to have a defendable like. I hate to have to say this because the freedom loving American in me hates saying this, but it's like you need to be thinking about a defendable position to an extent.
We're always on our heels
because we're the small dog in the fight, and we have a dwindling resource as far as land, opportunity, experience, value. Those things are diminishing. If you do want to talk about from a state perspective, they're looking at it as diminishing tag volume, which is diminishing PR dollars, it's this revolving circle.
Yep.
And it's like this, the movement forward starts with us. Mm-hmm. It's got to. There's no other way. Mm-hmm. It can't start with us going, hey, government, you got to put more money into this, or hey, you got to do this. It's like, no. It starts with the people who are steering the industry forward, which is people producing content.
Yeah, platforms.
Whether it's brands, storytellers like us, podcasters, whoever that is, that's where it starts. And those are the values that that I just hope that this podcast rings true. That's like for people who, I hope general listeners listen to this and they think it makes them think about what they are perceiving their value as and how they experience hunting, and that they care less about naysayers. regardless of the caliber of the deer that they shoot or they harvest. I hope brands listen to it, and I hope that they think, what's the messaging that we're putting out there, and what's the subliminal messaging or the subcontext associated? What rhetoric comes with our messaging, And I hope content creators like know when to say no. I'm not going to do that. Because it's like we have to start somewhere. It's like
that's it, man.
I wish there was a way to. It's a hard question. It's a hard thing to answer or talk about, but I think it's important.
No, you said it well. I think we got through a lot of the nuance. I mean, there's always going to be whatever you're going to call it, diversity, division, divisiveness, and I think like internally, it's some level of it is healthy. Like there's going to be different. It just is reality.
Yeah.
But in terms of outward facing content, I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. What can we at least make an active move in? I can't change somebody who just is always going to hate somebody for the way their hair color is or whatever.
Sure.
It's like that's you're always going to have people.
Yeah.
Who
Well,
just
basically,
like this,
you could say the anti-hunting community is lost for the most part. The non-hunting community is generally.
I don't even think that they're all lost. I think they're all
most of them uneducated.
I think most of them are uninformed. I think there's my personal opinion, just based on the conversations I've had with anti-hunters, a lot of them align as anti-hunters because of extremist anti-hunters.
Sure.
That yes, to that point, the extremist individuals will never change. But I think that they're 10% or 5% of the entire group. I think the wider audience is aligning because they just are uninformed, and there's not enough good context and good messaging out there that's easily discernible, and the community is not articulating it to the general hunting community. They would, I feel like a lot of people, and rightfully so, they would rather, they would rather not deal with it than take an active stance. And
take the Humane Society. There are some very extreme Humane Society activists who want to see hunting done away with. The vast majority of Humane Society would agree with the three of us at the table, which is we don't want to see dogs get beat and abused and horses abused and I don't want to see that happen. Right. So that's
wildlife. I don't want to see wildlife abused.
That's where that weird stigma is like, the Humane Society is one of the groups pumping a lot of money into the houndsmen and the cats out west. So I say that lightly, but the vast majority of those people in the Humane Society are uneducated about that type of hunting. They're just looking to make sure that puppies aren't getting abused.
One of the most powerful pieces that you guys could try to cover, like it would be, every hunter since the beginning of time has tried to explain, either by showing the process or by, having discussion about just, so if you love them so much, why do you kill them? Or the root of the question is, so why do you hunt, basically?
Well, I think that's part of that. I can't talk about all of that.
Yeah. Well, and if you could relay that in a way, or show that to where a non-hunting or anti-hunting community could see and understand that.
I say that because there's that question is directly being relayed in projects we're actively working on. Mm-hmm. So like that is, I think we are working on projects that do that. I think other people are working on it as well, and it's not about...
And they have in the past. I've seen...
dude, plug for him just because he's a friend of mine, but Robbie Kruger at Blood Origins does an awesome job with some of these pieces, especially if you listen to any of the ones where he's interviewing anti-hunters or the non-hunter side of things, eye-opening to what they think they know, but what they really don't know.
And we're lucky enough to work with Robbie on quite a few projects, and that's Robbie believes that mission, and he does a great job.
Yeah, Robert.
Robbie's doing a great job.
He's awesome. Yeah,
and I love Robbie, and that's, I wish that mission, regardless of whether I'm trying. How
Jacob,
I say
listen, hear my heart, brother.
feel the heart.
For those who don't know, go check out Blood Origins. Robbie's an awesome African guy.
Yeah, if anything, his accent will just captivate you for a while.
Yeah, but I think that it's whether you 100% are in on what Robbie is doing specifically and how he communicates his message, or whether you you just resonate with what we're talking about. The messaging needs to be about that conservation and preservation. It's not that we don't. Robbie enjoys hunting just like I do. Robbie enjoys pursuing big stuff just like I do. But Robbie takes an active and a responsible driven position on clarifying that messaging. It doesn't mean everybody has to go out and have a giant Instagram and YouTube account. But think about the next time you're sitting in a bar and you're talking with your hunting buddies and somebody scoffs because they overhear you talk about hunting. Instead of just being bullish, be like, well, ask a question. Why do you not like, what's going on? Let me try to articulate this. Let me show you that I care about this. There's, so it's like, and from a brand perspective, support people who are trying to make sure that this is still around.
Yeah. I mean that, there's other factors talked about CWD and stuff like that, but obviously in a presidential election year, we see the political, factors at play here, and that will always be, one of the most dangerous threats to hunting, if not the most dangerous threat to hunting overall. So
yeah, no, for sure. But it's like the battle starts with us, though.
I like it, man. I like it. Well, you guys got to go pick Matt up at the airport. He's probably just...
You text him, you were all right?
Oh, he's already landed. He's gonna be pissed.
Just tell him
there's like a bunch of restaurants there.
Yeah, crush some permanis, bro. Yeah, that's what I'd be doing. Just smacking some permanis.
Yeah, we got to go pick up Matt. We're gonna go do some cool stuff with cameras and
beauty.
Have a little bit of fun, and probably talk a lot about deer hunting because we're a month and a half away from all of us sitting in a tree.
We are. We're gonna drop some links into some of the films. We'll get with you and Matt on which ones, I don't know, you want to put in there, but just so if people want to check out some of the work that you guys have done here in the past.
Yeah, that'd be great. And you can find us Land Limited on Instagram. You can find right now that kind of the new venture we're on. I'd appreciate if everybody gives a look is Outdoor Creatives Co. on Instagram. The Outdoor Creatives account is all about if you're interested in filming, documenting, doing anything that you want to do, whether it's for your hunts or just commercial. We're trying to provide information for free, help give people the opportunity to learn and grow. And we have a lot of cool stuff coming with that for the future that specifically is built around helping the outdoor community be more creative.
Very cool, man.
Is the Instagram the best place for people to get you for work-related projects? If somebody...
Yeah, so Instagram is the easiest format for us to communicate with the general audience. So if you guys are out there and you wanna reach out to myself, Matt, Adam, any of there's three of us that are kind of heading this up. Myself, Matt, you can find him on Instagram. It's The Land of Matt. Adam is Day 6 Outdoors. If anybody's familiar with that account, both, Matt's been my best friend and business partner for a long time. And Adam has become a best friend and, over the last 7 years or so. And, I love both those guys. They both believe in the mission. They both believe in the type of stuff we're creating. They're phenomenal creatives as well as friends. So, follow those guys. If you're interested, reach out to us through Outdoor Creatives, just kind of spread the positive word.
Very cool, man.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, dude.
Yeah, brother, we appreciate it. And we appreciate everyone listening to episode 197 on the HUNTR Podcast. And we will catch y'all next week.
Later.
Take me